All right, so very importantly, please don't confuse the two. A student management system is one where it manages the students' information, such as grades, personal information, contact information, etc. That's what iSIMS does. Now, not because you log into iSIMS to get to Moodle doesn't mean Moodle is a student management system. It's just that the two systems are what we call integrated, that they communicate with each other. So one system talks to the other and tells it what is happening. So iSIMS talks to Moodle and says, Mr. White is logging in, allow him to log in because I verified him already. Or if it's a student, it's the same process. iSIMS says to Moodle, go ahead and allow them to sign in without having to put in a username, without having to put a password, because I have already checked that for them. You can go ahead and allow them in, but they're two different systems, right? And so as you're using these systems, if you have any trouble, you have to be careful what you say now to IT personnel. Because when you say to IT personnel, I have a problem with iSIMS, but your real problem is with Moodle, then we become confused because we're looking in iSIMS for the problem when your problem is not real iSIMS, it's with Moodle. So be careful how you use those, right? Another quick question though for you guys, and again, this is just to ensure that we all are on the same page. All right, so there are three terms that are generally associated when we start talking about education, you know, through some kind of means that is not face-to-face, let me put it that way. The three terms that are very popular are distance learning, e-learning, and online learning. Okay, can anybody tell me, or well, yeah, can anybody tell me if these three are synonymous or if they're different terms? Does anybody know? Are these three terms the same? Can they be used interchangeably? Or are they different terms? Do they mean different things? And what do they mean? All right, I'll take that as a no. IT people are excluded, by the way. But these terms are actually different, okay? They do have some slight mix between them, but they are actually different. So for example, electronic learning or e-learning means that you're learning using some electronic means. It doesn't mean that it is this at a distance. So it doesn't, so in other words, if I'm in my classroom and I'm using the projector, I am using electronic learning. So electronic learning can be face-to-face. It doesn't mean it's at that distance. So even though people love to say e-learning, I think that that means that I am here and you're all the way in Kingston. No, that's not what e-learning means. E-learning means electronic learning. As long as you're using some electronic means, you are doing e-learning. Distance learning means that you're learning at a distance. However, it does not mean that it has to be electronic either. So if I take a book and I assign a chapter to a student to read that book, when they go home, that is distance learning, because distance learning doesn't have to be electronic. All right. And then, of course, online learning is where you're learning through the term online, meaning the internet, right? So as long as somebody's learning through the internet, through some online means, then it is online learning. Again, that can be at a distance or not. Online learning tends to more be a form of electronic learning, right? So just remember those three terms. You can't use them interchangeably because they all have some cross between them, but they do mean slightly, they have different definitions at the end of the day. All right, so be careful how you use them. Now, in talking about online learning or any type of learning, there are two other terms that come up. One term is synchronous and the other one is asynchronous. All right. Now I need someone to tell me what's the difference between synchronous and asynchronous learning.
May I speak, Mr. Bonner?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
Let me see if I remember anything from my course that I did the other day. I think synchronous, you're online together learning. Asynchronous, you tape the lesson and students can access it at any time.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. I'll just make a slight modification to the last part, however. So when you say tape the lesson, it doesn't have to be taped. It just, as long as the lesson is not with both of you on at the same time, or it's not required for both of you to be on at the same time, then it's asynchronous. But yes, go ahead. Very good, Mrs. Taylor. So far over this last year, what we've found out, we've realized a lot of persons have been doing synchronous. We all use Zoom to teach our lessons. However, one of the things that you have to understand is when you use Zoom, you're never going to get that interactivity that you'd have had in a face-to-face class. Sometimes you don't even know if the student is even paying attention to what you're doing or what you're saying, especially with our internet challenges that we have between us and the students. You really don't know if a student is on because the student can't put their video on. Sometimes you have challenge putting your video on. And if you were to turn, if every student was to turn their camera on, then that would start draining their data so much that you probably would start having more glitches than anything else. So what we tend to do is to turn off the cameras. We actually turn off the cameras to save on bandwidth. Some students don't even have a good connection any at all. And so because of that, it means that a student will be doing anything, just like how we're in this session now, and other persons who already know some of these things might say, hey, this session, I don't really need to pay attention to this session because I kind of know this already. And so they'll go and do something else, right? And so I don't know who is actually in the session fully or who is not, right? So those are some of the challenges that we have when it comes to using Zoom. That interactivity is gone. And because of that bandwidth challenge, we really don't know if students are really actually participating. Greetings, Mrs. Thomas.
Greetings, Mr. Bonner. Good morning, colleagues. Happy to be in the room with you all. Can I please ask each person to properly name themselves for the purposes of our record? Like I'm seeing a CB and I'm not sure who that is. I don't wish to interrupt the session again, so I'm going to ask each of us to kindly rename our instrument to reflect our professional name. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Bonner. Thank you, colleagues.
No problem, Mrs. Thomas. Right. So synchronous has its potential and it has its advantages, but asynchronous also has advantages that we have to examine, right? So some of the benefits of asynchronous is that students get to visit or view material on their own time. Now we did a session with CCCJ, I think it was last week, where many persons presented on things like that, having the student have some say in how they access information or when they access information and how they learn. And so that is part of it. Now, when you do a synchronous, especially when we do Zoom, because there are different types of synchronous, by the way. Remember, Zoom is, synchronous just means that both persons, both entities, the instructor and the learner, are required to be in dialogue at that very specific moment in time. Asynchronous means they don't have to be. They're not required to be. They might end up being on at the same time, but they're not required to be in order for the instruction to take place. All right. So when you use Zoom, you're giving the students basically just one way of learning, one mode. The unfortunate thing about that is if a student, let's say, for example, again, in our challenge of the internet, a student loses an internet connection, well, they miss the entire instruction. Or let's say the electricity went, you know, and in some cases, it might be just a matter of the bandwidth that they are allowed. So for example, some students will tell you that Zoom actually uses more bandwidth than Google Meets. And so for them, they'd rather to use Google Meets because they have to be trying to save on data. All right. So a part of it is trying to see how can you organize your lesson in such a way that you help the student with this bandwidth challenge. All right. By having synchronized sessions, you are forcing the student to be there exactly when you're there, which might not be the best thing for them. Sometimes it might be that they can get additional internet at a specific time that is not convenient to you. And so you have to always be taking these things into consideration. And that is why synchronous is not necessarily the best way to go. Asynchronous is a much better direction. For one, it means the student can access material on their own terms, at their own time. Now, it doesn't mean that you give them complete free will and say, you can access it next year, because obviously we have a semester to complete, right? So we can't just go ahead and just say, you know, you have this entire period. We still have to have some kind of control. But what you're going to be doing as a facilitator is really trying to reduce how much strict access and try to widen that border, right? Widen the boundary really of access. So your students now are able to access material without you being there. Your students are now able to learn without you being there with them directly. Your students are now going to learn how to be responsible. And so that is what this session is really about. It's how do you put your material together in such a way that your students become more responsible and have to take charge of their own learning. One of the comments that I've heard before is, you know, we put up material on Moodle, but the students don't read. But it depends on how you put it up. And it depends on what incentive is there for them reading the material, right? If there's no incentive, then why would I go and read it, right? And so there are ways that you can have incentives there. So what we're going to be going through today is how you can set up your class notes in Moodle that ensures or motivates or pushes a student to actually read the material that you have laid out, right? And by doing so, by adding all these different types of content, videos, text, music, whatever it is, but by adding all that in your lesson, you are now ensuring that the student, one, has access to it even if you're not on, so you don't have to be online at that time for the student to access it, right? Two, they access it using the data that they have in a more efficient way, all right? And then, of course, because one of the things, I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but both Digicel and Flow actually give unrestricted access to social media platforms. They don't give it to Zoom. So Zoom is not free, but YouTube is free. So when you use more YouTube videos, not on Zoom, but you provide links to those YouTube videos, they can actually watch those YouTube videos for free. But if you play that YouTube video through Zoom, the telecommunication companies don't actually provide that for free because they don't see the Zoom, the YouTube link. What they see is the Zoom coming through. So, you know, because what you're really doing is playing the video through your computer, through your internet. And so what the data that comes over is really through Zoom, and they don't give Zoom for free. So if the student gets the links and gets a link from YouTube, get links from different social media that are free, the student can actually go and watch those completely free without worrying about bandwidth. All right, so that's another big advantage with this. So by going onto YouTube looking for videos or even posting your videos, We won't be able to go through posting your videos today, but if you'd like, another session can be organized where we can show you how you can create your own video, upload it to YouTube, and then retrieve the link. All right, but for today, what we're just going to be looking at is how do we use Moodle to create our class that is asynchronous, sort of automated. So what will happen now is you don't have to be progressing at the student yourself. The student will progress based on the conditions that you have already set in Moodle. All right, and so that will actually help to ensure that the student can actually move according to their time, but still according to your boundaries that you have set. All right, so I'm gonna have you watch a video now, and this video is gonna talk about, it's a video called, the title of the video is Adaptive Learning, but it's gonna talk about an activity that is in Moodle that is called lesson activity. The lesson activity is a very unique one because it really allows you, the lecturer, to design exactly how you want the student to go through your material. It allows you to add things such as questions at specific points in the lesson, and it can be used for grades. So for example, you could actually put in content, ask 5 questions, then have additional content, ask another 5 questions. And when the student is complete, it gives an overall grade and says, this is the grade that you got. You got 40 out of 60 questions correct, or 55%, 70%, which can be used as an assessment. So going back to the presentation that was done with the CCCJ, you remember what when they were saying, you know, formative testing, etc., and summative testing. And this would be one component where, in other words, you are actually testing as they read. So you're giving them the material to read, and then you're asking them questions about it. But the other beautiful thing about the lesson activity is that if a student doesn't do well, or if a student doesn't do get a question correct, you can actually redirect them to some other material that they should read, and then redirect them back to the question. And that way, so in other words, you're ensuring that the learning takes place. The beautiful thing about it is, once you've designed it, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to go and go check and say, all right, this student didn't get that question. It does it automatically, because you have already designed it in such a way that once a student doesn't get a question correct, the system directs them that they must go to a page. The lesson activity also allows you to determine how you want students to proceed. You can set it up where they can jump from any page they want, or you can set it up in a way where they must proceed in the path that you have designed. So a student can't start at page 1 and jump to page 50. All right, because it allows you to create many pages. And if you want, you can say this student has to go from page 1 to page 2 to page 3. And if they are after page 3, they can do page 4, which has your questions. But if they don't answer the questions correctly, then they must go back to page 1 and start all over. And they can't jump over it. All right. You can even add restrictions, such as they must spend a certain amount of time on this lesson. So for example, you could say this lesson requires them to at least spend 15 minutes on the lesson. Now again, you don't know what they're doing on their computer system. So as you can just open the lesson and, you know, go on to something else. There's only so much and no more we can be doing. All right. But what you're doing is putting in these things in place. So a student has to actually answer the questions at the end, and then based on that, then that determines how they proceed from there. All right. So I am going to share a video with you, which will introduce you to the lesson activity, and then we can have a little discussion now afterwards on it.
Learning. Moodle's lesson activity enables teachers to create content which can adapt to a learner's responses. This is useful for decision-making exercises, simulations, independent revision, and subject practice. Learners can choose their own path through the content. In this first aid lesson, teaching CPR, the course participant can first choose whether they wish to read text or watch a video. Then, when they've taken in the information, they're presented with some quick questions to check understanding. Let's explore how this lesson is made. Our teacher adds the lesson by turning on the editing, selecting lesson from the activity chooser, giving it a name and description which can be displayed on the course page by ticking the box. Other settings can be expanded by clicking the links. Appearance. Show More displays all possible options. Administrators can decide what displays by default and what is accessed from the Show More link. And the help icons give more information about each setting. A file useful during the lesson can be uploaded in the linked media section and will display in a side block on the desktop or a button on the Moodle app. A percentage progress bar, a menu that's a list of pages, can also be displayed. The figure in the maximum number of answers defines the response options our teacher has for each lesson page and can easily be changed later. Availability. Lessons can have a time limit and a password, but a time limit can't be used if students are going to do the lesson offline on the Moodle app. Flow control. Here we can let students review, but not repeat the lesson, let them try questions again and decide how often, and decide what happens when they answer correctly. Other settings are similar to other activities, but it's worth knowing that in activity completion, you can specify a minimum time spent before the lesson is marked complete. Save and Display takes our teacher to the Edit tab to decide what to add first. Note: it's helpful to plan your lesson structure in advance so you know where you're heading. Existing questions can be imported in certain formats. A cluster is a group of question pages which appear randomly to students. Find out more in the documentation. A content page contains information, while a question page offers a type of question, for example, multiple choice. So let's first look at the content page. Lessons can contain text, images, videos, and links. Once our teacher has added the content, it's important to make the connections, that is, jumps, to subsequent pages. That's why it's really important to have planned your lesson structure first, so you know where you're jumping to. This is the first page, and here are the options to jump to. We'll leave them as they are for now, as we haven't made any other pages, but when there are other pages, these will appear as names in the list of options. So our first jump will be to a video page, and a second jump will be to a text page. We'll leave them as they are for now. Saving the page displays its title, its type, this is a content page, jumps and actions, deleting, editing, duplicating, adding a new page, etc. We're seeing the collapsed tab. The expanded tab shows the same information but in more detail. Most times, you'll be happy with the collapsed tab. We need to add two pages, one with a video and one with text. So we click Add a new page, Add content page, and then add our video. In the jumps, let's give the option of going back to read the text and also of testing yourself. These pages don't exist yet, so we'll ignore the jumps for now. Then we need to click again, add a new page, add content, and add our text page. Now let's look at those jumps. Our lesson isn't going to navigate correctly until we fix the path through the pages. So we return to the first page by clicking the edit icon and go to the jumps. Now the video page is visible as an option, so we can link to it. And we can link to the text page as a second option. We need to repeat this for other pages. Finally, a question page will test the learner's understanding. So we click to add a question page and decide the type of question, perhaps multiple choice. Answers can include links, media and images. When the student gets the question correct, we can, if we want to, direct them to the end of lesson. If the student gets the question wrong, we can, if we want to, make them remain on the same page until they get it right. Here's the editing screen of the finished lesson, and it's important to check all the jumps are correct with named pages. Don't rely on next or previous page, even if you think your navigation is okay. What students see. As our student navigates through the lesson, remember we added a time required completion condition to ensure she read or watched the materials thoroughly. If she reaches the end of the lesson before that required time, she won't be allowed to complete it yet. Lesson has many other settings and features which we don't have time for here. Again, the Moodle documentation can give you more information. To summarise, Lesson allows you to create a personalised experience for your learners.
All right, so based on that, you'd have seen how the lesson activity kind of works. Now, there are a lot of settings that exist. And again, we won't be able to go through every single one, but we can go through the more critical ones that will actually help you as you go along. So I'm going to share now with you my Moodle account. All right, and so what we're going to do is actually we're going to look at the critical settings that you will need to use, and then we look at some other settings that will help to even make your course a little bit more automated. All right, so I actually started one already. All right, so this is actually a lesson, network cabling. Now, one of the things that, if you remember from the video, it said was, it's very important that you plan out your lesson from day one. How many pages do you want? Which page must jump from what page to what page? That is very important because you don't want to be in the lesson and trying to create it, and then you're trying to remember which page jumps to what. So you want to actually, it's best to get like a sheet of paper, and then you break down, all right, what content am I going to have? Then what do I want to have next? You don't have to put all the content on the same page. You can add as many content pages as you would like, because by adding more content pages, then you are actually able to ensure that students don't become bored if they're reading material only. All right. Also, try to add other things other than just text. Right. So in the video a while ago, you'd have noticed they said the student had the option of actually watching the video or reading the text. So you're actually catering to two different kinds of learners right there. You have a video that explains the text, but you also have the text for the person who is not really into the video, but actually is more of a person who reads and understands. All right. After any one of them, so if the person reads the text and they say, well, I still don't understand, they still have the opportunity of going to watch the video. All right. And vice versa. But when they're finished and they think that they understand the material enough, then they can go now and do the questions that exist. And you notice that if the student doesn't answer the questions correctly, then you still have options. You can now say where they go. If they fail a question, what do they do? Where do they go? Do they go back to the first page, or do they just redo the test? All right, it's totally up to you. So in this one, actually, I just did some introductory question. All right, and then based on that, then it takes them to content. And after they leave content, then they go to a series of random questions. Now, you don't have to use the cluster I chose to use it, but you don't have to use a cluster. Clusters is when you want to have a random, have the system generate random questions. When I say generate, I mean, you already have the questions in there. So you notice I have question 1 and 2, but what will happen is once they're underneath the cluster, then the system will actually determine which one of these questions are presented first. So it randomizes the questions. If you don't use a cluster, it just doesn't randomize. It gives the questions either in order of how your jumps are set up, or in the order of how the pages are. So for example, if my jump says next page, and it just means it goes to the next item in this list. This will work in this exact order. So the jumps here says jump to the next page, which would be types of network cables. The jump here says that it jumps to cluster, right? I could have put next page because obviously the next page is the cluster, but one recommendation is that you always use the name of the page. Don't actually use next page and previous page, because if the order of your pages are not correct, then you would have had an issue. All right, but by using name pages, you can't go wrong. Regardless of where the page is, it will jump to that specific page, so you won't have a problem. So we're gonna actually look at creating a new one, and then I'll come back to this one in a bit. Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Okay, you say again, create something, so me wait on that. All right.
Okay.
All right.
No problem. All right. So to create, we're gonna go back to our course page, and we're gonna go through it step by step. So the first thing, of course, you have to turn editing on, and of course we do it by clicking on this little gear at the top here, and select turn on editing. As long as you want to add new content, or move them around, you have to turn editing on. All right, and editing is normally off by default. All right, so if I want to add a new activity, and of course I can, put it under whichever topic I'd like. I'm going to put it at this one. So let's click on add an activity, and you see all the different activities that you have there: assignment, chat, etc. But we're looking for the lesson activity, which is this one, and you can always read information as to what it does here. All right, but very importantly, it's good for self-directed learning of a new topic. All right. Yes, Ms. Brown.
Good morning, Leon. Can you start from showing us how to actually create the course? Because when I've been trying to do that and I'm not gaining access to it. Like
no, you shouldn't need to create the course. Remember, course containers are automatically created for you on.
So it hasn't been created for me, so that's the problem.
No,
all right.
Yeah, no. So well, let me just advise on that since you asked. So your course containers are created when the timetable is added to iSIMS. All right. So as soon as that data is entered into iSIMS, when you log in, then the course container will be there. But until
that's when I can actually do it. That's when I can actually start adding content and all of that.
Right. But for now, what you can do is you can start planning out exactly how you intend to have it, so that you have all the material ready, all your videos, all your texts, your questions, and the order in which you want it to play out. All right. Think about it as if you were creating a video and you're saying, I wanted to read this first, then this, then this, then you do this activity or watch this video, then you listen to some, maybe some, whatever it is, and then you do a test. All right. And you can do more than one set of questions. So you could actually have them read some material first and then do some questions on it, then continue. Anyway, yeah. I was gonna say something, but let me wait until we get to it, and I'll explain it a little bit more. So we're gonna add that lesson. All right, but just know that your containers will soon be ready. Just give us a little more time and we'll get those sorted out. So you must have a name for this. All right, and let's just call this learning adaptive education, for example. And of course, you can put in a description, whatever that description is. By checking this checkbox, you're just adding the description to the course page. So the name of the activity will always be there, but do you want the description of the activity to be there? And you can check this checkbox for that. Now, if you click on appearance, sorry, there are some things that are there. All right. Linked media, any media that you intend to use, you can have it there as well. So if it's a file that the student have, it's a video, whatever it is that you want them to view, you can add it here. Or whatever material that is in another file, you can add it here. If it's a music file or whatever it is, you can add it here. The progress bar, just by question, just a notice though, if you raise your hand, just please lower it, because I'm seeing 3 hands raised, and I'm not sure if you still want to say something or if you've completed. All right, yes, Doc.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Bonner. The problem I am having, because I've used this, but I want to know if we do have inserts for special characters that we have to do with in science, because when I put in my tests and stuff, I can't get the special characters.
Yes, special characters are there, but you have to kind of learn the shortcuts. What I can do, I can provide you a link later on.
Okay.
That will give you how you actually get those special characters in.
All right, great.
Yes. All right, so progress bar for the lesson now is whether or not you want the student to be able to see how far they have reached, right? Again, that's totally up to you. So what it will just show is it will give you a percentage as to how far in the lesson are you. Are you at the beginning? So are you at 10%? Are you at 100%? Whatever it is. Display ongoing score. So as they're doing questions, then do you want to show them, all right, you now have a score of so and so or not? Very importantly, the display menu part is very critical. If you want to ensure that the student doesn't jump over material, then you don't want a menu to be displayed. Because if the menu is displayed, then the student can always select a different page separate from what you had organized. So if it's that you have no problem with the student jumping from page to page, then you can display a menu bar. But if you want them to specifically go according to what you have planned, then no, you don't want the display menu to be active. All right. Of course, you can display a minimum grade. So you're telling the student ahead of time that this is the minimum grade that you need to get to display the menu. So if they've already achieved a certain grade, then the display menu can be displayed. All right. The rest is just typical slideshow. Maximum number of answers is set to 5. And that is where it comes to, like, if you're doing multiple choice, what's the maximum amount of questions that you want to be able to have the option of adding. So normally our multiple choice questions are normally 4 answers or 5. But if you want, you can actually increase that to more than that. If you set it to 4, and when you're actually adding that question, you all of a sudden want 6, you won't get it because you'd have set it from here to say that it is 4. So that is why it's very important. You can use default feedback, and default feedback simply means that depending on what the question, how the student does, the system can give back a default feedback. So you can say, for example, if the student gets 60%, between 40 and 60%, what is the feedback they must get? If they get between 60 and 80, what is the feedback they get? If they get between 80 and 100, what is the feedback that they get? So in other words, you're able to have the system giving feedback without you even checking anything yet. All right. So you can be saying, well done, you've done excellent, good work, blah, 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 as part of your default feedback. And then the link to next activity is where you can say, okay, once you've completed this activity, where do you go to next? What is the next activity that you should be doing? And so there's a link. You can say which activity you want it to link to. All right. And we're going to be going through some of the settings that I want you to learn. But these our first settings are really just specific to the lesson activity. All right. Some of the others that we're going to go through now actually are common to all activities. So for example, availability is common to all activities, all right? When is this activity available? You can say when it starts, when is the deadline for it to be completed, and the time limit. How much time do they have to complete it? So what's the difference between the time limit and the deadline? All right, so when you say an activity is available from, let's say, today until next week, it doesn't mean that the student can, you know, they have forever to go through the whole thing, especially when it comes to a test. It doesn't mean they have the entire week, because you can set a time limit, and the time limit is different. So the available from and the deadline is really a window. So you're saying a student can start, let's say, an activity from today to Friday. They can start anytime in between, but the minute that they start, the time limit now is how much time do they have to complete it. So if they started tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock and you had set the time limit to, say, for example, 90 minutes, that means that they must be complete by 10:30 tomorrow morning. So that's what the time limit means. So available from and deadline are really just a window that you have given, but it does not mean that they get the entire time to sit down and do it. So if you have a test that you're giving, for example, and the test is a 90-minute test, then the time limit is 90 minutes. But because we already know you have internet challenges, you have availability, you have all sorts of different things, then we give them a window in which to do that 90 minutes. And that window might be that they have from 9 a.m. tomorrow morning until Friday to complete it. They don't have to start tomorrow. They don't have to start on Thursday, but they need to start and complete before the deadline. But the minute they start, that 90 minutes starts to count. Another thing to be aware of is they need to start at least 90 minutes before the deadline. Because if the deadline is 5 p.m. on Friday and they start the exam at 4 p.m. on Friday, the system will not give them 90 minutes. It will give them 60 minutes because your deadline to end is at 5 p.m. on Friday. So even though you have given them a time limit of 90 minutes, that 90 minutes will be reduced if you don't start in time to finish before the deadline. All right. Of course, you can password protect the lesson. So again, apart from just the availability, you can put a password on it to ensure that only persons you give the password. This is not exactly 100% secure because, as you know, students always share passwords, right? So, but yes, you can you can password protect the lesson. It can be that instead of using the availability, what you do is maybe you hold the password until a certain time and then you give them the password when you're ready. All right. The last feature we're not currently using because we don't really allow students right now using the mobile app, so it wouldn't apply to us at the moment. But later on, that's something that can be used. All right, using the mobile app. The flow control, also very important. And this is specific now to the lesson activity. You won't really find flow control in many other activities. So allowing students to review, you can say yes or no. And review just means that the student is allowed to go back through that lesson. Now, it doesn't mean that the score that they get will actually change. It depends on the other settings that you apply. So a student, if you set the maximum number of attempts to 1 and say allow student to review, yes, it means that the student can, when the student finishes the activity, they can always go back and go through the activity again, and they can even attempt the question if you choose to. So you can say you cannot say allow the student to try a question again. But at the end of the day, their maximum number of attempts is still 1, which means it's only the first score that you will use as your grade. So they're allowed to go back through as many times as they wish, but they score, they won't get the new grade. So they got 10 out of 50 at first for the first attempt. And they go back through a review and they end up getting 30 out of the 50. because you have set it to maximum number of 10s to 1, it means it will only use that first score that you have that would have been generated. All right. Now, what is the action after the correct answer is selected? Now, that's totally up to you. You can say the normal path is followed, or which is normally the case. When a correct answer is given, you want them to continue on the path that you're on. But it can be that they are shown an unseen page or an unanswered page. So again, depends on how you want them to progress through your lesson. An unseen page meaning it may have been that they backtracked. So again, depending on how you set up your lesson, it may have been that you redirected them because they failed the first quiz or something like that. So they were redirected somewhere else, and they're coming back through the path again. Now that they have gotten the answer correct, you might want them to jump now to a page that they have not seen, or maybe you want them to continue, even though they may have gone through this page before, let them still go through the page again. All right. So normally we set it at the normal follow lesson path, because that's just kind of the best way, but it depends on what you intend and what you want to accomplish. Most of us don't use the grading structure in Moodle, but it is there where you can put in what is a grade to pass. And this is actually going to become very important when you start looking at restrictions. All right, which is one of the things we want to talk about a little bit today. So you can put in what the maximum grade is, you can put in the grade to pass, and you can put in if it's a practice lesson and if retakes are allowed. Yes, Ms. Barnes?
Mr. Bonner, just wondering, the maximum number of attempts, can it be set to be specific to a particular student, or it has to be for the entire class?
No, all right, so maximum of 10s, that will be to the entire class, because these are general settings that are to the entire class. If though you have a specific student, then you can do what is called an override, and where you actually allow them to do a second attempt. So you can actually—
that's actually what I was asking, if that is possible.
Yes, that is possible. So you can actually do an override now, where for a specific student, you increase the maximum number of attempts to 1. In fact, that's what we did in the many CCCJ exams, actually, where an issue occurred because we couldn't just go and change the maximum number of attempts to 2, because in the general settings, because that would have changed it for every student. So what we have to do now is to go into the system and then tell it to override that rule for that specific student, and then increase the number of attempts for that student only. All right, so these are just the general—
You're going to show us how those things are done?
Yes, I can do that as well. Yes, okay. I can do that as well. All right, so but these settings that you're going through is general to the entire class. All right. All right, so let's continue.
One other thing, Mr. Banner. When you increase the attempt for the student or the class on a whole,
right,
you can change it to them get the higher grade. So you said 3 attempts and it uses the higher grade. How you do that?
All right. All right. So generally, trying to remember where that part is. It should be somewhere here. There's a section here, I'm not remembering where it is, but there's a section here that would allow you to do that, where you can actually tell it whether you want to use the highest score or the average.
Retake allowed.
Yes, activate that.
Right. Here we go. Right. Thanks so much, sir. Right. So here you have it. So retakes allowed, and then basically handling of retakes is where you now get to set that. So you can say it's the mean or the maximum of the retakes. All right. That's all right, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to set retakes though to no. All right. And then, of course, we have our common module settings, but this is something I'm going to go through with you guys another time. It's not so critical to what we're doing right now. All right. However, if you have if you have a certain activity, like for example, a discussion where students have to discuss and you want them to discuss in groups of maybe 5 or 6, that's where this would really play out. But for now, we're gonna skip over this because this is not critical to what we're trying to accomplish today. All right. The other one is restrict access. And this can become actually very complex because how you add restrictions can add up. One restriction can become a part of another restriction, etc. So restrictions are where you can say, I want to restrict this activity from students because until a certain date or until they have completed another activity. So if you remember before, I said to you, you can have this system running all automated where an activity is not given to the students until a specific objective is met. Maybe it's that they have to read some material, or maybe it's that the date hasn't occurred, or maybe it's that they have to do a test and they have to get a specific grade. And so that's where all of those settings are. So on the restriction, I can say that this activity is restricted until this activity that I'm choosing, let's say, for example, Network Quiz 2 is marked as complete. All right, so when I'm adding a restriction, it says student must, and I can change this from must to must not. So it could be that I'm saying student must not have this as complete, or I can say this is where the student must have it as complete. All right, I tend to prefer to use must because when you start getting into that negative thing, it can become extremely confusing. All right, so student must match the following to do it, to not be restricted, right? They must complete the Network Quiz 2 activity. It must be marked as complete, or I can say it must not be marked as complete. Where would you use a must not be marked as complete? Anybody can tell me? Why would I say it must not be marked as complete?
If you fail?
All right, if you fail, that could be one. But what else? What other scenario in which you'd want to say a student can do this activity if that activity was not complete?
If there was a prerequisite?
Prerequisite, all right.
Everything is not, if it's not finished, if the actual activity is not done.
But why? Why would you? Because normally you wouldn't be saying a student can do this work if that one is not done. But what situation would that be? What kind of, give me a scenario in which you'd be saying, you know, if a student does not do a certain activity, then they can do this one.
The activity that follows is not dependent on your completing that particular one.
Well,
could that be an exemption?
If it's ability based.
If a certain time have not passed.
All right, yeah. So it can be if a certain time has not passed, or it could be where you're giving another test or another activity because, let's say, for example, a student, you gave a test to students and 2 persons missed that original test. And I want to give those 2 persons and those 2 persons only this new test, this new activity. Then I would want to say that students must not have done that previous test in order to do this one. You understand?
No, sir.
All right, so I gave a test first. So let's say the test was Network Quiz 2. I gave that test to students before. Remember, you know, this activity completion here is saying that students should not have completed. The Network Quiz must be marked as incomplete, in other words, all right, or must not be marked as complete, which means they did not either they did not do it or they did not pass it or something. But in other words, it must not be marked as complete. And we soon talk about how do you determine when something is complete, right? So if I have a test I gave a network quiz 2 to students before on Moodle, but 2 students missed that test. So I want to now create a new test, but I don't want the students who did that test before to do this one now, because it's not for them, it's only for the 2 students who did not do that test. Then I'm going to say that the student must have network quiz 2 marked as not complete or marked as incomplete. So in other words, what I'm saying is only the 2 students who did not do that original test, which is network quiz 2, can now do this activity, because everybody else in the class would have had the activity marked as complete. All the other students who have done network quiz 2.
After doing the quiz, they have checked complete. That's what I mean.
Exactly. Once they do the test, then they are now marked as complete. So the only persons who would not be marked as complete are the 2 persons who did not do my test. Which means that once I set it to this setting, it means only those 2 persons now will be able to do this activity. Understand me? Yes, no, maybe so.
Yes, I understand.
Yes,
All
sir,
right.
understood.
Amen.
All right, so there are instances where you want to say, you're going to want to say that the restriction is if they have not done something, and there are instances where you want to say it is where they have done something. So, but most of the times it is where they have done something. So for example, I can say to the system, normally I would say to the system, if students have done the network quiz, if it has been marked as complete, then they can now do this next activity. And it can be any activity. So for example, it doesn't have to be a network quiz. It could have been my previous, lesson. And I could say that students are not able to do this new lesson unless they have gone through and marked that previous lesson as complete. So this was my previous lesson, network cabling, all right? The one that I was showing you earlier. So I select that and I say that this must be marked as complete in order for students to do this new lesson that we're actually creating. Remember, we're creating a new lesson now, you know. That's what we're creating. But what we're saying to the system is that this previous lesson or this previous activity must be done first before they can do this next activity. So this is one of the ways how you're forcing the students to do the activities, to read the material. Because in order for you to complete that assignment or that activity, you must do what the activity says for it to be marked as complete. When it is marked as complete, then this activity will allow you access. But until that previous activity is done, it won't. And you can add as many restrictions as you like. So I could add one that they must complete the network cabling activity. I can also add another activity to say that they must also complete test 1. I could add a restriction in terms of the date and say that I want the system to prevent access until a specific date. So maybe it's a case that I'm saying, all right, I don't want the students to be doing this activity until, let's say, November 1st. So even if they have done the network cabling activity and they have done the test 1, I still don't want them to access this until, all right? So I'm going to prevent access until the 1st of November. All right, and so access is restricted. And you notice how they join all of these activities together, right? Using ands. So it is saying all 3 must be correct. All 3 must result in a true in order for the entire thing to apply. Now, if it's that I want to say any one of them, because that is also possible, I could say to the system, as long as one of these things is complete, they're allowed to do this activity. And in that case, I would change match all to match any. And notice it changes to or. So you're saying if they do the network cabling activity, then they can go ahead and do this activity. Or if they do the test instead, then they can do this activity. Or if it is this date, then they can do this activity. All right, so again, match any means any one of them they complete. As long as they complete one of them, they can do this activity. Or I can say that they must complete all of these in order for it. They must meet all of these requirements in order for them to actually do this new activity that we're creating. All right, I'm going to remove some of these.
A programming, Mr. Banner.
Yes, it is a little bit of programming. And we might have to have a programming class for everybody, right? Because it actually can get even bigger than that. Because you can add what is called a restriction set, which is a nested set. So you can say that they must match this and this restriction set. And in this restriction set, you can say what? So it can actually get very complex and even bigger. All right, but I won't go down that road with you guys. If you have a very unique restriction that you need to apply, like they must do this test and one of these activities, then just just contact us at IT and we can help you resolve it. All right, because it does take you to break things down logically, and it takes a little practice. All right, we're not necessarily going to just do it for you, we're going to teach you, but to teach everybody in one big group like this, it's not going to be easy. All right, so if you have a restriction that really needs to be, you know, it's very unique and it has a lot of different requirements that are in different ways, then you can always contact us and we will help you sort it out. All right. Now, if you notice a while ago, I talked about activity completion, right? Who says when the activity is complete? How do you know when the activity is complete? All right. And that is where you come now to activity completion. Now, this is the general setting that is on all activities. Students can manually mark the activity as complete. But if you really want to force them to have to read your material, you can't allow them to manually mark that their activity is complete, because I say you could just go and say, hey, mark that as complete, I now have access to the other activity. So we don't want that. All right. If you are going to be trying to force them to go through the material as how you have it, you want to change the settings from students can manually mark the activity as complete to show activity as complete when conditions are met. So for the networking cabling lesson that I had before, and I said to the system that the student must have this marked as complete, in that lesson, I want to make sure I state how is the activity complete, when is the activity complete. And I want to change that activity completion setting to show activity as complete when the conditions are met. What are the conditions that you can have? Now, different activities have a different blend of conditions, but the general one is require them to view it. That's the one that applies to any activity. All activities will have that requirement that you can select, that the student must at least view the activity in order for it to be complete. The required grade now is it's one that we be very careful of. Why? Because if it is a test and you put that the student must receive a grade, if that test is not marked by Moodle, when I say not marked by Moodle, I mean it doesn't have multiple choice questions in there, it's strictly essay, then it means that until you, the lecturer, marks it and assigns the grade, the student cannot move on. All right. But if it's a multiple choice test, which Moodle will mark on its own and assign the grade, then in other words, the student can move on right after they finish that test. So you have to be very careful when you select required grade. It depends on, and again, remember now, it depends on the activity you're creating. So what you're saying now is that this activity, we're not talking about the previous activity. You're not talking about network cabling, because this is not the network cabling lesson we're creating. The network cabling lesson is already done. You're saying that this activity must be marked complete when the students view the activity. All right, and then we can now say when the students receive a grade. All right, so again, if it's a case that you're going to be putting in essay questions, because Moodle won't mark essay questions. All right, so if you're going to be putting in essay type questions, then Moodle won't mark it, which means that when a student completes this activity, they won't have a grade, so they will not be able to move on until you mark it. But if you use the objective type questions, true and false, multiple choice, etc., etc., then yes, the student actually will be able to receive a grade instantly and actually be able to move on. So be careful how you use required grade. All right, require end reached. And this is when it comes to the lesson activity. Again, not all activities have that, but the lesson activity has that they must reach the end of the lesson in order to complete the activity. So that is already checked for us. So if the student does 5 out of the 6 pages for the lesson, but don't do the last page, it's not complete. It must. They must go to all pages in order for them to for the lesson to be complete. All right. And then require time spent. And we saw that in the video earlier, where you can now say, all right, my video is for 5 minutes and the material, the text that I have also. So if you give them an option of whether watching the video or reading text, you can now time yourself and see how long does it take you to go through it yourself. If it takes you 10 minutes, then you can put down 10 minutes or maybe even 9. Maybe somebody moves a little faster than you. But again, have a good idea. So approximately how much time should they take? And you put that in to say that the students must be on this activity for at least this amount of time. By doing that, you're ensuring that if the student just clicks on it and then just clicks through, jump, reach the end, the activity is not marked as complete because they have not spent the required amount of time on it. And again, as I said before, we can't, there's only so much ANOMO we can do or Moodle can do. So if a student realize that they have to spend some time, they can click on it and then walk down about them business and still don't read. But again, that is where now the questions in the lesson comes in. So by having questions in the lesson, if they don't read the material, then when they get to the questions, because they can't move on, they'll never reach the end until they actually sit down and read it. All right. So you can actually use this setting if you want or not. Depends on, again, and you can always change these settings. So don't think that, you can't. The only thing is, once the first a student does it, any student, the first student that starts doing the activity, then the activity completion is blocked. Reason being is once a student starts the activity and completes, the system can't allow you to change the completion requirements anymore because you have now had a student that has done the activity, right? So you can't now say, oh, we change how the activity is considered to be complete after the student has already done it, right? So as long as no student has attempted the activity, you can always change the activity completion. But the minute they start, it will block you. You can override it, but if you override it, it will erase all the completion information for any student that has already done it. So again, it's something that you don't want to change once a student starts it. So make sure the activity completion is exactly what you want. All right. And then you can click save and return to course. Once you've completed the tags and competencies, you don't need to worry about those any at all. Not necessarily, not really for you much, different stuff. All right. So if you notice here, now we have it. All right. So it says restricted. It's not available unless the network cabling is marked as complete. Okay. So notice it's kind of faded, and the faded tells you that it's not available to me. All right. Now, because I'm the lecturer, I can still go in and look at it, etc. But the student by showing faded, it's showing you that the student won't be able to access this, and it's telling you what the restriction is. It's not available unless network cabling is marked as complete. But if I were to go into the network cabling program and go into its settings, all right, then what you will notice is that for this activity to be complete, it just has that the student must view the activity and must reach the end of the lesson. All right, and again, I actually did a preview of this, and that is why, if you notice, it's saying, this is what I was telling you about earlier. This activity has already been marked as completed for one participant. So if I try to unlock this, then all of that information is going to go away to cause confusion. So it will erase the completion state, right? Which might cause more confusion because the student who has completed now, all of a sudden, the system is saying you haven't completed. So that is why it locks it. But again, you can always unlock it, but just note, you might need to call that student and say, hey, I needed to redo this lesson because we had an issue, all right? So, but these are the restrictions, this is the completion requirements that were made, all right, for this specific piece, all right? And so what that means is the student must at least open, and let me just return to the front page. So the student must at least open the networking cabling lesson, and they must go straight through to the end. And after they've completed, then they will now have access to the learning adaptive education lesson. All right. Now, we've only created the lesson, the activity, but we haven't actually added anything to it yet. And that's what we're going to do. So to add to it, we just click on it. You don't need to turn on editing anymore. Editing is only when you want to add new activities. But once you've added the activity, you don't need to have it on in order to modify the activity. You can always modify activities. All right. All right. So that's where now we get to add our content page, our question page, or our cluster. And as I said to you before, not many persons might want to use a cluster, but a cluster is just really when you want to have a set of questions that are presented to the student randomly. That's what the cluster is for. So if at the end of the lesson or during the lesson, I want to present them with 10 questions, but I want them to be randomly placed so that no student gets the same question as number one, then I can create a cluster and the system will just randomly place those questions in. But if you don't really care about that and you just want them to just answer questions, you don't need a cluster. All right. Cluster does get a little confusing if you don't know what you're doing. Takes a little bit of understanding again of logical operations. So if you're rather to bypass it, then it's fine. You can just add as many questions as you'd like. The only thing is that it will just give them, everybody will get the same question in the same order. All right. But remember, everybody's doing this lesson at a different time. So John will get it and get question 1, then question 2, then question 3, etc. Mary will get the same question 1, then question 2, etc. But because they're doing it at different time, then technically they're, learning asynchronously. So I can add a content page, all right, because that's what I want to do. I want to add a content page. I tell it what the name of the page is. So learning adaptively. And then I can add my page content. This can be material from your lecture notes. You can pull material from your lecture notes and add it here if you want. You can add videos if you want. You can record videos if you want. You can add pictures, audio, whatever it is that you'd like to add, you can actually add it here. If you have links, like for example, if I were to go to YouTube, I could find a video that discusses and describes the topic that I'm talking about, and I can add the link right here. All right. Sorry, here. All right, so I just copy and paste. I can copy and paste the URL if I want and create a link or etc. etc. So it all depends on what I intend to do. All right, what I want. By the way, there are additional menus if you just click that little down arrow. So there are additional menus there. So you can actually format it nicely, put in your indentation and put in tables or what have you, that sort of a thing. And if you're into IT and like HTML code, you can actually type in your own, type it in HTML if you want, code if you want as well. All right, so yeah, you can actually add a lot of different types of content as well. Now, once you're finished with that first content, then you need to tell the computer or tell the system where does this content page jump to next. Now, if you remember from the video, they said to you that because you only created one page so far, then you can't really say where it must jump to next because you don't have a reference. You don't have a page for it to jump to. But you can put the name of the page that you're going to want here or the description. So I could say, for example, from this page, I want it to go to another, it's going to go to another content page that talks about adaptive technologies. I don't actually create the page yet, but what I'm saying is that's the name that I want to be on the link. That's the name that the students will see when they click on it. All right, so I don't tell it where to jump to yet because I don't have any more pages yet. So I just leave it at this page. And if you want, you can create it where you have more than one page that you can go to, up to 5. So I could create 5 different buttons. I can say this one goes to, let's see, technology links, for example. And I could add many, up to 5 different buttons, 5 different links to 5 different content pages or tests or what have you. I don't have to use all of them, I only need to use one, right? Because obviously you need to move from one page to something else. So I only need to use one that moves me from this page to something else. But if you want, say, suppose you wanted to create like a tree branch. So let me just do a new share quickly, 1 second. So say, for example, I wanted it to be where you have page 1, and from page 1, it can go to these 2 pages. And that's why I say, you know, it's good for you to design your thing from day 1, or you want it. So they can go to any of these pages. From these pages, they can also go to each other. All right. And then this is the test page, right? And so once they've completed, so it looks confusing, but think about it like this. So this is page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They can go from page 1 to page 2, page 2 to page 3, page 3 to page 4, and then page 4 to page 5. Or they can go from page 1 to page 3 and straight to page 5. So in other words, you need to plan out exactly how you want the navigation to be. Are they going from page 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 only? Or is it that you want them to be able to go to anyone and then they do the questions? Or do you want to force them to do 1, 2, 3, 4 and then they do the questions? So it really is up to you. All right, because that is always a possibility. You could always have just had them do page 1, then page 2, then page 3, and then they do the question. And if they fail the question, then it redirects them back to page 1. And if they pass the question, then they move to page 6. Because what you'd have done is, and I'm going to show you in a second, but when you put the question, you can say if they choose the incorrect answer, you can actually tell the system to send them back to page 1. And because page 1 only links to page 2, they have to go to page 2. They can't just jump through it again. And page 2 goes to page 3 only, and page 3 goes to page 4, etc., etc. And then they go right back to the same question again. And if they fail again, then they go right back. So it's forcing them to get the answer correct before they can move on, right? But if you do it where the other way that we had a while ago, then in other words, you're not really forcing them. They can always go to the question after they only need to do page 1 and one other page, and they can go to the questions, which means that even if they don't understand, they would have gone to the questions. And if the questions doesn't redirect them back to the beginning, then you have a problem. But that also has an advantage. It may be that the pages that you had there deal with different areas or different questions or different topics. So let's say, for example, it's a topic that students kind of know already. So you have 3 question papers. So these are questions. All right. And somebody moves from page 1, they can go to page 2, then 3, then 4. But once they go to page 2, they go to the set of questions. If they fail the first question, then they are redirected to a specific page that deals with that information. So maybe this question is about the information that is on page 2. So I'm going to put 2 here. So if they fail that first question, they're redirected to page 2. If they fail the second question, which is related to page 3, they're redirected specifically to page 3. And they fail the third question, they're redirected to page 4, which has the information about that question. So in other words, any question they fail, they get redirected back to that specific page that has information about that question. And so therefore, once they've you know, gone through that material, then they can go back and answer the questions again. All right. And so that ensures that you're learning the material, because your system is now looking at what you have passed, what questions you got correct. And if you get it correct, you move on. If you get it incorrect, you are directed back to that specific page that had that specific information. Which means if the student reads that information, it's unlimited. So the system just keeps redirecting them until they get it right, and then they move on. So that's the beautiful thing about it. If you want them to, if this activity is about them learning and not about a grade per se, then you can have them just keep doing it until they get the question correct. The system is not gonna, because the system is not gonna say, okay, your tries are oh, no, this is gonna keep sending them back, keep redoing the page until they get it right. Because until they get it right, they can't move on. So it really just is dependent on how you design it. All right. All right. So so that is why you have so many content.
Mr. Banner,
yes,
one
yes.
second.
Mm-hmm.
You see, this designing online content, you have to have a thought process, you know.
Yes, very important.
What you're showing me, I mean, like database management and whatever, you got your cycles and whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, sort of, but not exact. Because so what you are doing is really just designing how you want them to proceed through your material. All right.
Well,
when you want them to repeat.
Everything I do is a must. That are the simplest thing.
Right. And so if you're doing like that, then you just have page 1 to page 2 to page 3. But again, it depends on when you plan to test. Some people might want to put all the questions at the end, but some people might want to put questions in the middle. So again, it all comes down to how you can actually build yours where you have 5 content pages and then some questions, and then another 5 content pages and then some questions. Or somebody might say, I want to do all 10 content pages and then all the questions at the end. But it's how you choose to design it. But what is, yes.
Mr. Bono, sorry to interject, but just want to remind us that I am thinking, just listening to you, Mr. Bono, you're presenting a case where the students, we are assessing for learning the way you have presented it.
Yes.
So as they go through, we ensure that they know the content rather than testing at the end where the students basically say, swap the information and come and do the test. We're really testing as learning. What we really are wanting to seek to do is to ensure that the students are knowledgeable. And so I like the presentation that you are making to help us to understand how to do the testing as we go along, which is what I know most of the colleagues do anyway. But just to reinforce that this is how it is done while we are in the virtual space.
Yes, and they, just to add that, the beautiful thing about that is that you don't have to be doing it manually each time. So for example, if you are in a face-to-face class and you wanted to achieve this, the turnaround time would have been a long time. You know, if you teach a topic and you give some questions, you know, by the time you are to give some questions and find out that, oh, John didn't really get it, you know, it's hard for you to go over all of that material with John alone in the class time. You have to ask John to come back after class, etc. But by using the online method, the system does it by itself. So once the system sees John failed 3 questions, it carries John back to the additional information according to how you designed it. It might mean that, and let me just bring up back the other share just to show you something. Because you could have actually done something where, let me clear this, where let's say, again, you have page 1, and I'm gonna do a little smaller one. So page 1 and page 2, and then you have the test questions, right? Questions, Q, right? If he fails, you could actually not even redirect him back to the same pages, but to a different page where he gets additional information. So it might be that, all right, John didn't get it in that method or with that material. You have some material that might be go closer down to layman level, layman terms, right? But you never want to put, you never want to give, sorry? Hello? Oh, right.
That was you echoing.
Oh, okay. All right, so you didn't want to actually give everybody that layman term, because you know it might make persons who are a little faster feel like, oh gosh, why are we doing this? I already understand. So what you do is you leave that for specifically for students who did not understand. And so what you do is redirect those students to that page, but those who understood it on the first try can continue on the path that you have laid out.
Mr. Bono, I am seeing here where there's a comment in the chat, sir, that this is a lecture. So I don't know if it is that you would want persons to kind of get onto their iSIMS page and to kind of, you know, get familiar with all of the locations that you are referring to.
Okay.
If it would be beneficial if you ask persons to kind of minimize the screen a little bit or share the however they choose to. But I'm getting the feeling that if persons were able to get into their iSIMS page or their Moodle platform or whatever it is and be able to integrate with the platform, I don't know what terminology to use, some of us might be a little bit more appreciative based on the comment that I see. This is a lecture.
Okay, no problem. All right, so let me. So it's gonna be a little difficult, but let me see if I can work it that way.
Mr. Bonner, just a question.
Yes.
Morning, colleagues. I've not yet been on my iSIMS. Would it have been that the courses that each lecturer would have been assigned for September would have already been placed there, just following up on what Mrs. Campbell said?
No, but you should still have access to you should still have access to the previous courses that were there. So
the previous
use
courses.
anyone, right?
Oh, so you could just use that.
Anyone.
All right, logging on now. Thank you, sir.
All right, so if you are to log on, then you can start creating your lesson. Sorry about the colleagues, it was just that it's so much information that, you know, and we have a limited time today actually. All right, but what is important is that you have your material as to how you intend for students to proceed, and have your design how many pages you want, what will your pages be named, design it on paper at first. So that way, once you start putting the information together and putting all the material together, then you already know exactly how you're going to proceed, right? Everything else after this is just repetitive. So adding content pages, it's the same thing, just add a new page. All right, adding question pages, it's the same thing again. So I'll just save that page and I'll give you some time to open your iSIMS. All right, open Moodle and open one of your containers, one of your course containers, and then add a new lesson. All right, you're gonna add a new lesson. If you're still looking at my page and you're not able to open your own Moodle, then you'll notice I'm now on my edit page where I'm actually able to see the page that I just created. Sorry. The page that I just created. And from here, you can actually add other pages. So you can add content pages, question pages, whatever else it is. And you can preview. So you can preview it and say what it would look like to the students. All right, so I'll give you a minute to just open your iSIMS, open Moodle, and to add a new activity, a new lesson activity. All right.
Mr. Bono?
Yes.
What if you aren't seeing any courses?
You're not seeing any courses?
Yes. So when you click on training, right? You see no schedule found.
Come on.
So you click on Moodle.
That means that she was already deregistered from the course, Urbana. So she's not seeing any courses.
So go into Moodle and go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead into Moodle. You would have seen, all right, so remember technically semester 1 courses, according to the dates that are in iSIMS, semester 1, 2021 to 2022 has already started. And so because your courses are not on iSIMS yet, you won't see them there, but you should still be seeing them, seeing the previous courses in Moodle. So still click on Moodle, you should still be getting those old courses. All right, all right, so I just saw something in the chat. So if you were on leave last year, then you wouldn't have had access to any course because none would have been assigned to you. All right, so what you'd have to do, let me see if I can. If you were on leave last year, you can't sign up, but if you're on leave last year, just see if you just click on Moodle for me. I'm going to create a course for you, but in order for me to add you, you have to be registered into Moodle. So what you're going to do is still log into iSIMS and then just click on Moodle and then it will allow me to add you to a course.
Mr. Bonner, you will need to do that. I'm not sure if Mr. Fagan is on the system already, Alex Fagan, as well as Keon Fletcher.
They were given access to iSIMS. Okay. So once I click on Moodle, then I can add them to a course. I'll just add them to the same course that I was on a while ago.
Okay, but, thank you.
Yeah, but as I said, you need to click on Moodle. You have to come into Moodle so that you're registered into Moodle first. And then I can do it. I can't do it until you're actually in Moodle.
Mr. Bonner, are you redesigning the pathway, sir, of the presentation?
Sort of, yes.
Mr. Bonner, would it be a difficult ask if this course that you are directing the newbies to, if everybody couldn't just have that to eliminate all other issues that may arise? As the template for the activity.
Okay, all right, because I have to delete some stuff afterwards, but okay, no problem. All right, just give me a second. It's gonna, well, it's actually, it's best if they just use, it's best if they use theirs Because I'd have to actually add them one by one, and so it's easier for me to just add the couple persons that, yeah.
Because they need administrative access to their course Urbana so that they can add activity. So once they have a container to add a learning activity to, then they should be okay. And they need that teacher privilege to be able to add an activity.
All right, so now let's try to sort out the persons who are in the issues. All right, so Miss Allen.
Mr. Tyrone, I'm seeing here, I'm thinking that this is Patricia Balfour Gordon, and she's indicating that she's on neither platform. So I don't know if you could assist Mr. Anna with this, please.
Yes, I'm checking on that now, miss.
Okay.
Matt, you're working on Mrs. Balfour Gordon's account?
Yes.
Okay, all right, no problem. Miss Allen, just check your email now.
Dania Tomlin also is suggesting that she may not have access. I'm not sure.
All right, checking on, oh yeah, hold on. All right, Mrs. Tomlin, please check your email. You should have received a mail a while ago.
Miss Gordon, you as well. You can check your email as well. Miss Balfour Gordon, I think the name is.
Yes, I'm seeing it. Thank you.
Right, so I'm going to add all right, so Mr. Fagan, you should be able to get access to computer networks. All right. Ms. Balfour Gordon, just let me know as soon as I get into Moodle, and then I should be able to find it. Well, I can find it already, actually. Yeah. And
remember to give her a teacher privilege, Mr. B.
Yeah. Those Miss Tomlin yet. So I don't think she's in yet. All right, and as Ms. Balfour, you should be able to have access as well to computer networks course. So you can always log into that one. Anybody else who doesn't have a container already? Doesn't have access to a container on Moodle?
Morning, Keon Fletcher.
Okay. Logged in already to Moodle?
I have.
Something here. I'm logged in as well.
And you clicked on the Moodle link, right?
Change the role.
Yeah, but I'm not finding them. I have to go. 1 second. I have to go in.
You could have changed the role right in the first screen, you know.
No, man, I wasn't getting them any at all.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Banner, you can check on my one too, Roy Thompson.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Thompson, you logged in already?
Yes, Mr. Banner.
Okay. All right, it's supposed to be all right now, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Gordon is now okay, Sir B.
Okay. All right, Miss Tomlin and Miss Fletcher trying to find why I'm not getting you in. Trying to track exactly why. Do me a favor, just log off and log back into Moodle, please. So log off and log back into Moodle. You have to close the page, log in back to iSims, and then click back on the Moodle link.
Okay, will do. Okay, I did that.
Thanks.
Mr. Bono, where do I find the link for Moodle?
All right, so under training, when you log into iSims, under training, you should see a training option there on the left-hand side.
Right.
Right, click on that and then click on My Courses. So when you click on training, it should expand and you should see My Courses. You're gonna click on My Courses and then click on Moodle.
Okay, I'm in.
Wonderful. All right. All right, so all persons now should have access to a container. All right. So you're gonna create your own lesson. All right. So remember, the first thing you need to do is to turn editing on. And once you turn editing on, then you're going to click on add an activity or resource. Now, again, Moodle already organizes it in terms of topics, topic 1, etc. You can edit those and add new topics as you will. Some people like to do it according to weeks. So like week 1, this is what you're doing, etc. All up to you. But you need to add an activity under one of those topics or weeks, whichever way you guys have configured your course.
So,
right. Yes, Mr. Maxwell.
For the persons who are using the same container, using your container, when they're creating their activity, they can just ensure that they make note of the name of the activity that they're using so that there's no confusion.
Yeah, that would be good. That'd be nice.
On my former boss, Principal McLeish.
All right. Yes, Mr. Williams, you raise your hand.
There's a mistake there. There's a mistake.
Oh, okay, no problem. All right. So once you click on add an activity, you're going to look for lesson. All right. And then you're going to quickly run through the settings. Now, you don't have to do all the settings that we talked about before. Just kind of be aware of them so you know exactly when you're doing something, what is there. I'm actually going to be giving you guys a link so that you can actually use, I'll put it in the chat and then later send it to you by email. And this link is to the lesson activity, but actually it's to the Moodle documentation. Anything you want to know as to how to do it in Moodle is actually at this site, docs.moodle.org. It's there. You can find information on any activity and even how to do some administrative things. It's also there. All right, but I'm going to put that there. It has a video that I showed you earlier, and it has the instruction as to how you actually work. All right, so I'm going to put it in the chat. All right, and okay, good. Okay, no problem, Mr. Campbell, no problem. Okay, doing that for you now, Ms. Matthews.
Hold on. Mr. Bonner, I got through. Mr. Maxwell did it for me already.
Oh, okay. I'm going through the messages, so
I did
you got through already.
Never mind.
Let me know.
All right.
All right, that's done. So Mr. Perry was suggesting to everybody if you have a second device that will help, but if you don't, you don't have to view my screen. I'll walk you guys through as best as I can. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page so that we don't leave anybody. If you think you know it already and you can go through, go ahead and proceed. All right, so I just double check it to make sure everybody now has access. Dr. Scott, I'm just gonna add it to mine then if you don't have any previous course. And then I'll proceed. I don't see anybody else asking for anything. Yeah, Mr. Perriel, you can go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Bonner, question here. Is there any way that we can utilize persons accessing this part of the platform to generate a register at the end of the day? So if students log on, let's say they access the information, is there any way we could automatically have a register generated at the end of that session?
Well, I have never done anything like that with Moodle. I know I can tell you the last time somebody logged on, but I'd have to double check. Well, actually, yeah, you can see who has completed the activity. Actually, no, I remember. So So if you're going to an activity, let's say, let me use something that I've done actually before. Well, this wouldn't apply so much, but you can actually see who has done the activity. You can see who has actually done the activity. Let's try to remember where it is.
An attempt.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was trying to find somewhere else because I wanted to find it where, because it's a test, you're going to see the attempt right there. I tried to find the one where you can find it, even if it's not a test. But it's there. You can always view. You can actually view it. No, it's not that one I want either. But I'll check on it and then tell you, Mr. Perry. But yeah, man, because remember, it stores exactly who completes what. So yes, you can actually get that information as to what is done. But again, it comes back down to your activity completion settings. So if you put in there that your activity completion is as long as they've viewed it or opened it, then it means that you will get that list of students who have opened it, even if they haven't read a thing. So that is why the activity completion is so important. All right. You don't want to just leave it as they just have to open it for it to be marked as complete.
Okay, wonderful.
All right, so everybody should have created their activity, their lesson activity. So again, I'm gonna just run through the entire set of steps. So first you turn on editing at the little settings gear. Once that is active, then you can click on add an activity or a resource. When you select add an activity or a resource, you're gonna select lesson activity.
All is well. Okay.
Sorry, so it's just I think your mic was open accidentally. All right, so you're gonna select lesson activity, and once you select lesson activity, then you should get the screen that you're seeing. Mine says updating because obviously you know, I already created it before, but you should get back basically other than that the same screen, and you're gonna put in the description. All right, you don't have to do much of the appearance. You can leave those at the default. I'm going to turn the menu off, which that is normally the default, but I turned it on earlier so you could see what it would look like. All right, but everything else can be left as default actually. Availability can be left at default as well, at the default settings. The flow control can be left at it. So you don't have to actually modify those if you don't want to, but if you have a specific thing that you need, again, if you want the student to be able to review it, then you need to turn those on. So when you're going through, just look at the different options and click on the question bar if you're not sure, and it will tell you what it is and what it is about. So if you click on the question bar, it will actually tell you what it is for. All right, the little question sign, and it will tell you what it is for. All right, the most important one that you need to make sure that you double check is the activity completion. All right, because that will now determine how do you use this activity to control other activities. All right, so if your activity completion is not set properly, then it means that it will not restrict other activities that you say to use it. So if I were to set up a test after this and say that they must complete this lesson that we're putting together now, if your activity completion is that they just have to open it, they just have to view it, then it means that once they open the activity, they will now be able to do my test. So the activity completion is very important. Every activity that you do as of now on, try to check and the activity completion and ensure that the activity is only marked complete when certain conditions are met. Don't leave it at—
Mr. Bono?
Yes, Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Fagan is saying that he has checked his email from iSeams with the access code, but he's not seeing any.
What access code?
I'm not sure. He says, Mr. Bonner just checked for email from iSeams with the access code and username, not seeing it in my inbox.
All right, just to let you know, Mr. Fagan, you should have already had access to iSeams. What we did was to just update your account as a lecturer. So you wouldn't have gotten a new code. It would have been the same login as before.
If he doesn't remember his password, sir, but I'll just make a quick reset.
Right. So, all right. So this dialogue with Mr. Maxwell, and Mr. Maxwell assist you if it's that you don't remember your password. Yes, Mrs. Levy.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Mr. Bono, I've been speaking with Marshally. I'm having some issues. I'm not able to get into what she's seeing. I went on, I also selected semester 2020-2021, semester 2. I can see the courses that I taught, but nothing else is there. I can't select anything. All I can do is go into the class and see my students' name and information from last semester. The boxes Marshally is telling me about, I'm not seeing anything like that.
And that's on Moodle?
Yes, sir.
And you turned on editing?
I don't get a chance to turn on anything because I don't see anything that is saying to turn on anything. I'm just seeing the courses listed, and like ethics had 7.
Tell me one of the courses.
So they are listed: business ethics, personal development, principles of marketing, dynamics of leadership, small business.
I just need one that you want to use. All right, no, all right. I'll just add it to this course then. All right.
Pardon?
I'm just gonna add you to this course.
Okay, thank you.
So, right, so just give me a second and then you should be able to view computer networks.
All right, thanks much.
All right, so just refresh and then look for the computer networks course, and you should be able to go in now and make adjustments. All right, right. So to make sure that the activity completion is set, everything else is basically the same, unless you wanted to restrict access to this activity again based on something else. Other than that, your settings would have basically been the same default settings straight through. All right, you don't have to change any other setting in order to create a lesson. All right, but it's just how you use those settings later on to restrict other content as you wish, as you set up your course. All right. You might not get everything done on the first try because it will take a while for you to get used to it, but you have to think about it as everything flowing down a river. You know, you start at the first topic that you want them to learn, and you organize that, whether you want to use a lesson or you know, any other activity, discussion, whatever it is. That first lesson would be something that there are no restrictions on it, because obviously you can have a restriction, there's nothing else for them to do. But once they finish that, now they can say restriction on the second activity, and then restriction on the third, and restriction on the fourth, etc. And in other words, they can't do the second activity unless they do the first, they can't do the third activity unless they do the second, and you keep adding restrictions about the previous activity to ensure that they can't do anything until they do the first sets that coming down. All right, and once you do that, that will now help to push your students to read the material that you're giving them, because they can't complete it without reading it, and they can't move on or do any tests without doing the previous activities. All right, so I hope everybody's at the same point. So you've added your lesson, you have created a name for your lesson. Again, you can leave everything at the default. The appearance can be left at the default. All right, the availability can be left at default. The flow control can be left at the default settings. But if it's that you want to be creative or you want to get, you know, more advanced, then you can actually look at the settings. Many of them, they describe exactly what they do, but you can always click on the question sign to get more information and make your changes based on that. And you can test it and see how it would work. And if it doesn't work how you want, you can modify those settings and things before you move on. All right. What we can do for you is maybe create a course container that you guys can just use for testing purposes. So what we'll do is create a course, add all of you guys as lecturers to it. And then that way, if you want to test an activity and test how it would work, you can actually go in and create it. But please, when you're using it, just remember everybody's using the same container. So when you're finished, delete back what you were using so that somebody else goes in, doesn't have that to deal with. All right. So once you finish testing it, so that all the settings that you have are working how you want, just delete back that activity so the area is kept nice and clean. All right. Yes, Ms. Allen.
Question, Mr. Bonner. Good morning, everybody. For the area that we have grade and points, we type points, we have non-scale and points. Would you be able to explain what the scale and the points would indicate for grade type?
All right, so I have to wrap up my memory on this one because I haven't used it in a very long time. All right, so the grading systems are actually point-based, or one of them is actually percentage-based as well. And it's basically just where you can determine what the maximum score would have been, can be, and how you want to score. So for example, a maximum score of 50 points is different from, if you're dealing with it in percentages. All right, so what I normally do to refresh myself is to go back into the question sign, and it will actually give a good understanding as to how everything applies. So according to this, if scale is chosen, then you can choose the scale from the drop-down menu. If you're using point, then you can enter the maximum grade available for the activity. So in other words, scale would have been where you have specific set of grades, that you can select from. While if you're using grade, then you actually have the option of putting the exact grade that you want. So let's say, for example, you have an assignment or a lesson, and you want to be able to select either 5 points, 10 points, 15 points, or 20 points, then that would have been more your scale. But if you want to be able to put in 2 marks, 3 marks, 15 marks, so it's not specific steps, but actually any grade in between, let's say 0 and 20, then you'd want to select grade or point. All right. So, but normally I just stick to points. I don't really go into scale. I like to have the flexibility of assigning the grade based on what student, because it's like the question persons always ask about half mark. Sometimes some lecturers give half marks, some don't, but I like the flexibility. A student might give a response and it's not really a 1 point, but it's not really a 0. And so you want to have a half point there. So
I agree, Mr. Bonner. I agree.
All right, but everything else basically, if this is the first activity that you're doing for your lesson, so say this was the introductory lesson, then you don't want to go into restrict access. But if this is a second, then you'd probably want to go in and say restrict access, add a restriction based on activity, where you're saying that the previous activity must be done. And again, every activity that you create will come up here. You will see it in the list. So you can actually say, look for the first activity that was done and say, this activity must be marked as complete in order for them to do the new activity that you're creating. It's a little bit confusing because it's like you're creating one activity, but you're saying this activity that I'm creating cannot be done until they've done that activity that was before. So you have to always be reminding yourself, this activity that you're doing now, they wouldn't have done that yet. You're just creating it now. But you're saying that this current activity I'm creating now cannot be done until they've done the previous activity that you'd have created before. So you have to also do things logically. You can't be saying to the computer, add a restriction for an activity that you haven't created yet. So any restriction you're adding, it must be for an activity that has already been created. All right. So again, it's like a river. You start at the beginning and you're working your way down to the end, which is the same way you want the students to work. They start at the beginning of your course and they work their way down to the end. They don't go back upstream. Well, they can go back upstream, but they don't start at the end and go up to the beginning. No, they have to start at the beginning and work their way down to the end. All right. If they choose, they can always revise later on. So once you've completed that and done the activity completion, you're going to click save and return to course. All right. If everyone is not at that point, then just let me know. Okay, so Dr. Wilson asked a question. So yeah, well, it's a little tricky to answer. All right, that's what we're moving to. We just need to find out why the system had reset last year. So that's kind of what we need to find out, and then we will be able to get it to you that way. What I should let you know is, as any test that you give, once the system shuts down for a semester, you won't have access to those grades anymore. And let me explain why. In fact, let me explain why by showing you. When you give a test to a set of students, all their records are stored in Moodle. And when the student no longer has access to that course, so let's say the course has ended, then the student is suspended from that course. All right. And if you notice here, so in this course is my core course from last semester, all the students are here have been suspended. All right. Once a student is suspended, their records are no longer available because they're not in the course. So, so if it's a test, the test will remain, but you will not see the grades for that student because technically that student is not in the course anymore. Which is why we recommend to you, once you give a test, once the semester is coming to a close, you need to pull down your grades immediately. Because if you don't, then what will happen is the system will suspend these students and you will not be able to get those grades without us reactivating them in the course. So yes, there's a little fail-safe, you know, we can always go back in and actually reactivate them, but it's a long process because what we actually have to do is actually do them one by one, and that's a lot. When does the system close? At the end of the semester. So at the beginning of every academic year, we have to tell the system when the semester starts, when is exam, when the semester ends. Once you see the system start saying to you, your coursework grades are due.
Because I don't have.
Sorry, 1 second. Right? Once you see the system start saying to you, your coursework grades are due, and then you see it says your exam grades are due, it is in the process of going to be shutting down the previous semester because our semesters basically run right from one to the next. So the semester can't be open permanently. All right. For courses that run year long, we'll have to look into that one because to the system, it's still a different course. So we're working on that to try and get it to be, to carry it over. But yes, one of the things that we can do for you though, is if it's a case that a new container is created, we will have to just copy over the previous container to you.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Bonner. I need to find out because it is more critical for me in terms of the content. So I spend time preparing my lessons on the Moodle platform, the flow and all of that I want. How do I access my stuff after if it's going to be shut down? Am I going to have to be doing this every year?
All right, no. All right, so let's say shut down, the content is not really removed unless it's content that was taking up a lot of space. So one of the things that we advise staff, don't post videos on Moodle. Post them on YouTube and then put the link on Moodle. Because when you post the video, let's say for example, a video and the video takes 200 megabytes of space, then that's a lot of server space to be using up. And if you start multiplying that by the amount of staff, then that figure starts to really get big and you have to pay for the server space. You can only pay for so much and no more. So after a while, you start running out of space. So what we ask you to do is not post the video itself on Moodle, but we ask you to post it on YouTube, where YouTube is free. And then you post on YouTube and you just copy the link and put the link in Moodle so that the student just clicks on the link and views the video instead of trying to host it there. And that will help us to reduce the need for us to be, removing things because of how big they are.
All right, so great. Sorry, just before, because it's really connected to what you're saying here. So let's say this year, like last year, I would have prepared a particular course using the structure you're giving me now. Will there be a particular space? Are we moving to that place where we'll have a container where we can say hide the material from students' view, but just annually just refresh our work, update as necessary?
Yes, that can be removed. It does allow you to store some private files. I have to refresh myself as to how you access it, but yes, Moodle does have that ability where you can hide some personal files. But where we are trying to get to is where the course container would just remain the same, and so once you log back in, it wouldn't actually be removed any at all from you. That's where we want to get to. Yeah, but right, but all I'm saying though, one of the things is that why it removed last semester, we're not sure. That is what we're trying to find out in order to be able to rectify that issue.
Sir Bonner, can I interject?
Yes, Mr. White, go ahead.
So if I'm understanding what she's saying, right, each time that you create a container, that can be hidden from the student. If that was the question. And then after each semester, we can actually start showing it. Even during the semester, let's say you have some containers set up and you just want them to concentrate on just let's say the first one, then everything else can be hidden until we reach the next container, if that's what she's trying to find out.
No, that's not. I am aware of that. I'm just talking about carrying over from year to year, so to speak.
All right, so let me see if I can, let me just explain, since everybody wouldn't have had this issue. Well, you probably have it this semester coming, but so what happened to persons who teach year-long courses is when they had started populating semester 1 container. So say, for example, like IT for CSEC, and they started populating all of that information. Then when semester 2 came, the lecturers were moved over to a new container, which didn't have the material they had populated from semester 1. So that's what Doc is asking about. So what they would want is a situation where instead of them being given a new container, empty container, and students being reassigned to that new container, they would want it to be where it's the same container, and what they do is when the next year comes, they hide the materials as they choose, right? But what happened to us last semester is that we're not exactly sure why the system created the new containers. So that's what we're trying to find out. Why did it create new containers instead of just reassigning the persons to the same containers that already exist? So not everybody would have had that problem. Only the persons who actually teach year-long courses would have realized that that's what happened, because those persons who teach semesterized courses, then you would have already had you'd have had a new course, which would have mean you'd have had a new container anyway. But those persons who teach year-long, that didn't, they were expecting it to be where it moved from the semester 1 containers would have been the same containers in semester 2, and that's not what happened for them. All right, Mr. Campbell, you had a hand up?
Yes, sir, Bonner. All right, similar issue like Doc. So, for example, I would have taught disaster in semester 1, and I would have it. And now, this new semester now, all the disaster information would have been gone. So it doesn't mean now I have to go and repopulate everything all over again.
When you say gone, because I'm not sure why it have been gone for you.
I don't see it.
Have you checked it?
I checked. Let me go back into it. All right. So, all right. I even went into last semester, 2020 to 2021, semester 1, and I'm not seeing it there either. And no, for this new semester, now, when I look, I'm seeing it assigned to me, but it's empty. So does it mean that, you know, each year, so semester one, I teach X course, right? Semester 2, Y course. The following year, when I'm teaching semester 1 again, if I'm teaching the same X course, is the information is gone. That's how it works? I have to repopulate it again?
All right, so this one is kind of surprising to me. I have to check to see exactly why your information have gone, because what happened before, the information didn't actually go away. What happened was that you were just given a new container, but the information was actually still there. The only thing that was removed, again, as I said, is files that were extremely large because they were affecting the system. All right, so if you had uploaded, you know, some seriously big videos or anything on Moodle, they would have been removed by the developer because they were having that issue with space. But other than that, I don't think, well, from my knowledge, nothing else would have been removed. If it has been removed for you, then I'll have to check to see why it was removed or who removed it, etc., before I could answer that. But generally, generally, what we're saying is that we don't want it removed any at all. We were saying that that's where we want to get to. But in order for us to get there, we have to first understand why the system would have done it that way, to be able to make some modifications or speak to the developer to say, all right, put in a change here to get it to work a different way.
Mr. Bonner?
Okay, appreciate it.
I am not seeing, I'm seeing the same issue with mine as well. So you might have to take a look into that seriously.
All right, no problem. When we finish the session, then I'll speak to you both, and so we can look at that to see exactly what is happening with your containers. Because it didn't happen to other containers that I know about. So need to find out why it's happening to yours.
All right. So Mr. Bonner, I realized you, if you permit me, I realized you said that we should use the YouTube for videos. Instead of uploading the videos, we should use the link from YouTube. However, I don't necessarily upload the videos. What I do is that I use the link. Say, for example, if I'm teaching a course, as I taught in Introduction to Ecology, and I wanted the students to learn about biotic and non-biotic organisms, I would have uploaded the link or use iSIMS the YouTube link and not necessarily the video itself. Would that have taken up too much space, or is that
no,
okay?
man? As long as it's a link, then it's fine. That won't take up any space at all.
So I can remove my hand. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Same issue. Just touching on the same issue. Not going to stay long, but then the option of you being able to copy it and bring it over for the next semester is still around.
Yeah, as long as it's there, then yes.
Okay,
as long as in fact you actually should be able to copy it over. It's another lesson. It's another session might be. It's not very difficult, because actually, if you just go into your settings gear for the course, let me just come out to participants 1 second. If you go to your settings gear for the course, actually you see where it says import, and you can actually tell Moodle to import from a course. All right, so if you notice all the courses are here, you can search for the course if you're not seeing it in the list, because the list is going to be big. And you can search for the course that you want to import from, and then once you find that course, then you can actually import material from it. So as a lecturer, you can actually import from your previous course if you want. But if you're not so certain about how to do it, or you're not so confident in doing it, then we can actually help you with that as well. But as long as the material is there, because, and I said that because since I'm now being informed that some material has disappeared for some persons, then as long as the material is there, then it can be moved, can be copied.
Mr. Bonner, I'm having the same problem. I'm sorry, Mr. Bonner, I'm having the same problem. Looking back at some of my semester 1 courses, I can't find the container.
or I might see the names of the students and so on. But the container is not there when I go to Moodle. But what I've been doing is backing up things that I put onto Moodle because I really don't trust the system that much. So if I put on a test, I would back it up so that when I'm ready, I can just move it from my desktop back onto Moodle, the Moodle platform. So I think apart from importing, we can also back up whatever we put there so we can find it when we're ready.
Yes,
Back it up on our desktop. Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Everybody now at the same position or at least or have completed? Because I know some of you probably complete already.
Mr. Bono? Mr.
Yes,
Bono?
ma'am.
Sorry to interrupt. As I was saying it and I got disconnected. Another question that I have for you is I don't know if it's because I have access to the courses and the other lecturers don't in my role, but for communication one, I had started putting on some stuff and I can see it on my page, but I asked Mrs. Brown to look at the page and she was saying that she can't see it.
Did she teach it before? Did she teach it before? Because if she didn't have access before, then she wouldn't have access now.
Yes, she taught it before. So I'm wondering if it's because I'm the acting HOD where I can see it and they can't see it. And if so, will I lose the information that I put on that page? Or can they just continue from there?
No, man, they can continue from there. But when we put on the new courses from the timetable, then we'll be able to sort out everything else.
Oh, so they'll be able to see the information that's there right now.
They should be able to, but if they're not have to sit down and work with them to find why.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
All right. Right. So everybody's at. Yes.
Hello, I had raised my hand. I don't know if you had seen
Oh,
it.
sorry. No,
but
I
I
didn't
just want to
realize
let you know that I had checked for my semester one courses too, and I'm not seeing the containers with them.
No,
So
remember.
maybe you could check it from Maisie Atkinson, please.
All right. So just remember, for semester one this academic year, until the timetables are up, then you won't see the semester one containers for this year yet. So as soon as those are up, then you'll get them. All right. So what you can do is still plan out all what you plan to do, and then as soon as we get them up, at least you have all the information you can put up immediately. All right. If you're having a problem where the last semester containers, you're not seeing them or the information from your last semester containers have disappeared, then that is something now that we could talk about later, because I need to look at your account specifically to see why it has disappeared. All right. So it's 12:31 and I don't have any lunch for you guys. So I want to give you time to go and have some lunch. But is everyone at, well, how far are you? Have you completed the settings, and are you now adding your content pages?
Mr. Barnum, I have a question to ask you.
Yeah, Mr. Taylor.
You see, when you assign, let's say you have a quiz one as the activity, multiple choice.
Okay.
Or you're going to enter the answers so the system can mark it.
Oh, okay. All right. Once you're doing a multiple choice, all right. If you guys will permit me, I'll just do a quick thing on that. But for now, well, actually, I can do it from here. All right. So I'm gonna add a multiple choice question from here. All right. So because it's the same actual interface. It's just that this one is where so I'm gonna add a question page and I select multiple choice, and this is where now I can put the page title is really, yeah, it has to have a page title. Let me just make sure I make that straight. I'll just call it Q3. For me that means question 3, but you can give your page title any title you'd like. And let's say we wanted to ask the question,
are you a student of Kabla Mandeville, wherever?
All right, are you a student of Kabla? You know what? Campus do you attend? All right. And so I've had here, so cobbler.
Oh.
All right. Answer 2, Mandeville. But how do you now tell the computer which one of these items is correct? It's the score that you assign. So if I assign 1 to this, to cobbler, the score of 1 to cobbler, and 0 to every other answer, then that tells the system that that is the correct answer. So in other words, once the student selects cobbler, they get a score of 1. If they put this, if they put the 1 at Mandeville, then that means that the student gets a 1 if they select Mandeville. All right. So what the system is really storing is how much marks does that answer give you. So sometimes you can have a multiple choice question that actually has multiple answers. All right, and you select multiple answers, and you can put 1 for cobbler and 1 for Mandeville. All right, or it can be that if they select Mandeville, they get 0.4, and if they select cobbler, they get 0.5 because whatever. So it really just depends. So when it comes to multiple choice, you don't have to have a one-off answer like it's only this answer. You can actually have all the answers can actually have marks, but it's just that they don't have as much marks as the full correct answer.
Could you just go back to the first part where you showed me how you get the multiple choice?
Oh, all right. So I went to add a new page. But if it was a quiz now, you'd have gone to add a new question. All right. But for the lesson, it's add a new page. So let me save this then. Put this back at 0. I've got multiple answer. Save page. I remember you must save your information. Now you notice I have 3 questions now. So all I did was to, if I wanted, wherever I want the question to appear in my list, then I selected the previous item. So if I want to add a 4th question, after Q3, I would go to Q3 and select where it says add new page and select add a question page. All right, so that's how you work.
That I'm seeing here, you're making the choice from.
Right.
Where did you create this?
All right, so once you created your lesson, then this is what you get. It's where you're gonna get to add all the pages for your lesson. So, so let me go back to that so you can see. So I was second. So when you selected that you wanted to add a new lesson activity, you'd have been here. And so once you've put in all the settings, you can either click save and return to course or save and display. All right, now I'm gonna click save and return to course. All right. And then once you get back to here, then you're just gonna click on it. You just click on the activity itself. So once you click on the activity, then it will come to that screen. Preview might be there or edit might be there. You can click on edit. If it's not there, just click on it. If you're not selected that already. But once you click on edit, then that's where you get to put in all the pages that you intend. You can add multiple content pages, multiple question pages. Again, you can add a cluster, but I'm not going to go through that today because again, that one is really about random questions. So you don't have to go through that today. All right, but if you're interested in it, then we can look at it at another time. But basically, a cluster is just really where once you start a cluster, any questions that come after that becomes a part of that cluster, which means it gives the questions randomly. That's all. All right. But you don't have to use a cluster. You can just add the questions. What it would do is it will give the questions exactly in the order that you have the questions. So that's all the cluster really does. It just randomizes it for you. That's all. All right. So you add your questions and you can add more content. So if I wanted to add content after Q3, I could have gone to the Q3 and select add content page and add another content page itself. More about cabling. I can add content. All right, and then I can add where I want it to come. I can say next page, which means It's the next page in the list of pages that you saw previously. Or I can say it jumps straight to the end of lesson. Or I can say that it goes to, I can select the exact page that it goes to, which could be that it goes to the end of cluster, or it goes to cluster, or it goes to end of lesson. All right. So every page that you create, you'll see the name of the page here, and you can select the name of the page, or you can select next page. But again, we don't recommend next page because if your pages aren't in the proper order and you select next page, then it will go to the wrong page. So that's why we don't recommend it. But if you're very versed on it and you know exactly what you're doing, you can use next page and previous page as you wish. Especially if you're just going from page 1 to page 2 to page 3 to page 4 to page 5. You can just use next page if you want. All right, so I'll say end of cluster.
Next page on the next page.
All right, and so again, it will now look. So now you will see me have several pages, another page added. So first I had an introduction question, which was a true and false. If you notice, I have 2 next pages here. The reason why I have 2 next pages there is because if the answer is correct, it still goes to the next page. If the answer is false, it still goes to the next page. So you have the option to say which page it goes to if the answer is correct and if the answer is incorrect. Because they're both going to the same page, then that's why you see next page appearing twice. All right. Types of network cables, I only use one of the links that were there. Remember, we have 5 content links that were there, and I only used 1. So we only have 1 there. The cluster, only, and again, not going to go through cluster today, but it only points to the cluster, unseen question in the cluster, where it just says pick one of these questions to show first, then pick one to select second, then pick one to go third. Again, it just randomizes. That's how it works. All right. And after the third question, it goes to the next page, which is more about cabling. After more about cabling, then it moves to the end of cluster. All right. So this was a multiple choice question. There were 3 answers that were available. Regardless of which answer you select, it goes to the same, goes back to cluster. All right. But I could have said to this specific multiple choice question, and I'm going to just do it so you can see. All right. I could have actually said to it that if the person selects answer 1, then send them to end of lesson. If the person selects answer 2, send them to question, let's send them to types of network cable. So send them back to types of network cable. And if the person selected question 3, send them to more about cabling. Save page. So in other words, for every answer, I'm sending them to something and a different page, which is what I showed in the diagram earlier, where depending on the answer you give, that will tell you which page, that will push the student to a different page. But that's again, if you design it that way. So see it here, same thing I have. End of lesson, if they select answer 1, types of network cables, if they select answer 2, and more about cabling, if they select answer 3.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Bonner.
Yes.
I was just a question here, please. So you would have to do that after each question. After each question on the multiple choice test. You have to
No, all right. So for each question, you have the option of determining based on the answer that the student gives, if you want them to go to a specific page. So if you remember in the drawing that I did earlier, where I was showing you where if the student answers the question incorrectly, you can actually redirect them to a previous page. So say, for example, you had made them read types of network cabling first, and then they were supposed to answer the question, but they got the questions wrong. Why are you getting the questions wrong? You just read that information. So you can then say, since you got the questions wrong, that means you haven't learned. Redirect back to types of network cables for you to go read again, or it can be that you redirect them to a video for them to watch.
Or that is just for the regular lesson, not for the
lesson.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
So for every question that you add, the system gives you an option of determining where you want to send the lecturer, the student after they've answered the question. If they've answered it correctly, where you want them to go. If they've answered it incorrectly, where you want them to go. So if it's a true and false, it's only 2 answers. It's either true or false, so that's why we only have 2 here. But if it's a multiple choice, you have up to 5 different answers that you can put down. And so therefore, you have the option of determining where you want them to go for each answer for that multiple choice. All right. This multiple choice only had 2 answers, so that is why we only got 2 links. One goes back, one goes to the next page. So if the answer was correct, then they are allowed to move to the next page. But if the answer was incorrect, then they are redirected back to the same page for them to redo the question.
Question again, Sir Bonner.
Yes.
These assessment pieces, these little mini quizzes you're giving them. This can be a part of your grade book.
Yes, yes, you can use. That's a beautiful thing about it. So you can actually use it as part of as one of your grades. So you could actually assign it a 5%. And again, it depends on your department and how you want to organize it, right? So CCCJ normally gives you two common coursework, but the rest of the coursework is really up to you and your department. So your department can say this piece that we're doing, it's a lesson, but it is also worth 5%. So a student needs to do this if they want to get that 5%. And it's a very easy way for us to get a 5% because depending on how you set it up, the student can actually have the option of redoing it if they did not do well while you're ensuring that they're learning. So because they get a chance to redo the assessment, if they didn't do well, they can actually redo it, but by redoing it, you're ensuring that material. And so it's not just a free 5%. They still have to work for it. But at the end of the day, the student doesn't fail just because, well, they went through the material and never understand it the first time. And so that's why they can keep going over it and going over it until, but again, it depends on the settings that you put in. Some lecturers might put in that you only have 1 shot, 1 chance, 1 time to get that grade. While some lecturers might say, let's put it in for 2 chances. And if you do it 2 times, we use the average or we use the maximum score. So again, it really comes down to how you guys want it to be organized. That's the thing about Moodle. It is not going to force you to use any specific method. It gives you all the options that are available. It's up to you to decide how you want to use it and what you want to use it to do. But yeah, you can use this. And I would recommend that you use it for some of your grading because, again, this is ensuring that you have learning taking place and not just this thing where you give the material and then say test. And a student either pass it based on how you explain it to them or fail. Because, you know, you have different types of learners and some learners learn one way. And sometimes it's not easy to teach all the different ways that students learn. But when you have the material there that they can go through and they go through at their own pace, then that is better for them. And they use that as part of your grade.
School is a wonderful place, you know.
Exactly.
You get info, then you get tests. With life, you get tests, then you get info.
Oh my. Yes, I tell you. But the key thing about this though is if you're going to use it as part of your assessment, then you know you might want to only give maybe 2 or 3 tries. You know, otherwise you might end up with everybody always having 100%. Which I don't know. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it also depends on how your institution is, because you know some institutions will say how everybody gets 100% in every single assessment, you know. So yeah, it's still something you have to look at. So the amount of tries that you give is also still very important if you're going to use it as an assessment, because you want the key thing is to have learning taking place. But if you give too many tries, then what you're going, yes, you have learning taking place, but you might end up now where everybody gets 100% in everything. So, you know, again, you have to weigh the pros and cons and try to find that middle ground. Not that you don't want everybody to get 100%, but if you give them unlimited amount of tries, then, you know. another question might be asked. So once you've added all of your content, then your last page should always point to or jump to your end of lesson. So if you notice mine here, it jumps to the end of lesson, all right? And if you were to try and preview, because you can always preview your lesson, then okay, it's saying I'm not allowed to retake lesson because I've taken it before. But well, I'd have to refresh myself everything to get it done. But yes, well, actually, we have the other one that I could look at. Let me see if somebody else has done one that I could do. Okay, I'm not seeing any others, so I'm not seeing where anybody else has created one. All right, so I don't have any questions in this one. We didn't get to that point, but we only created one content page, right? But again, you can add more content pages as you see fit, and then based on that, you add your questions. And again, you have the option of adding a small amount of questions during it. So I don't know if you guys remember when we were doing when COVID just started, and we actually got some lessons that we had in the staff development container on how you can take care of yourself. And in it, like as you're going along, it asks questions. So you got material, you got video, whatever, and then it would ask questions about the video. That's kind of what you'd be having. You're asking questions in the middle of the lesson, so that when you get to the end, you know students would have learned because they would have been answering those questions correctly as they go along. And if they didn't answer correctly, you could send them back to the beginning to start over again. Or you can send them to something else so that they get more understanding of it. All right. But at the end of the day, when they get to the end, they must have learned, because now they would have been answering your questions correctly. This does not fix the glitches that still can occur. So for example, a student can say, hey, the answer for question 1 at A still will be possible, but in a situation like this, it's less likely to occur because a student now realizes that I can always go back and redo this question. I don't need to cheat, because it's not like, boy, if I fail this, then that's it. It's the end of the world. I can just go back and go read it and, oh, it's that, and go back and go answer better. And so you'll have less cheating because the student realizes that it's more about them learning than just passing the assessment. PowerPoint, yeah, you can add the content from the PowerPoint, yes. And you can actually add a PowerPoint file. At the beginning there it says files, media, files for the class. You can add that and then have the PowerPoint as part of your material. When you were creating the activity, you'd have seen it. But the best way is just to copy the content from the PowerPoint and add them as pages. And that way you can control those pages much better. All right, so Mr. Hall was asking if PowerPoint can be used, and it can be, but the best thing is to add the content from the PowerPoint as pages. So each slide would be a page on its own. And that way, because you have more control of the pages than the PowerPoint, because if you try to add a PowerPoint, then the PowerPoint is just going to go straight in order. You won't be able to block it or stop it at a point. So if you add the slides, you can actually add 5, 6 slides and then do a question. If you were to add the content to the page itself and not add the PowerPoint itself. All right, so that's what I'd recommend. All right, where are you guys at now? Not hearing anybody currently. Everybody has added some content pages, and I've added some questions.
Mr. Bono, I'm not sure if you answered. Oh, it's okay. That question wasn't for you.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Bono, but I just want to know, for the purpose of this training, I'm not sure where the registry or VP student services is. as it concerns students' assignments and receipt, and if this platform nullifies the distribution of receipts when students would have uploaded assignments considered to be major assignments. Is there any way that you can distribute receipt to the student to say your assignment has been submitted?
All right, wonderful question. All right, so actually, once a student does an assignment, they submit it through Moodle. Moodle will keep track of it, and they can actually get a receipt from Moodle or printout as evidence that they have submitted. However, iSIMS itself, and again, remember when I talk about Moodle and iSIMS, they're two different platforms. But iSIMS itself carries a receipt for assignments as well on its own. So let me just log back in. So if you were to go on the training and my courses, you will see my assignment receipt right there. So you can actually create an assignment on iSIMS and want the due dates, etc. And then once a student submits that assignment, you will actually come in into the same space, and you would actually select the assignment that you gave, the student that you want to give a receipt to, the time that was submitted, and you click save, and you upload and you put in the comments and click save assignment. Sorry, what that does is the student is now able to get a receipt for their assignment on their side of the portal. So the first thing is actually you have to create the assignment first, put in the assignment title, the due date, and the comments, and you click create the assignment, and you'll see all your assignments popping up right underneath the assignment tab here. When a student submits that assignment to you, you now select that assignment, select the name of the student, the date that it was submitted, and time, and you can put in your comments and click save. And then the student will actually have the assignment receipt on their end of the portal that they can always print out at any time. All right. And that is, of course, if the student submits it, other than Moodle. So if it's a case that they're submitting it via Moodle, then Moodle will have its own records that they can print out. But if it's a case that they're submitting to you hand copy, so say for example, maybe it's something that has to be done, hand copy wise, or hard copy, then the student you can actually create the assignment here and then create the and once the student submits, then they will get that receipt as proof that they have submitted their assignment. All right. So I don't have any assignments here now, but that would have happened. You notice that I have to select the semester though, by the way. So I could select, for example, let me select last semester, which is semester 2. All right, the lecture is there on one of the courses I want to create this assignment for is computer networks. And I would then put in the assignment name, the date that it is due, and the time, and my comments, and I create an assignment. So let's just call it assignment 1. And this is due, I'm just going to put in from it here. 2 o'clock p.m. create assignment. All right. So the assignment is now there. Okay, I can modify it and I can delete it, and it tells me how much submissions I have. And then I can always go now, select assignment 1, select the name of the student from my class, and select the date that they submitted and click save assignment. And that record now is there to say that the student has submitted an assignment. All right, and again, they will also receive that alert on their page to say that the assignment receipt has been given, and they can print that out for their evidence. All right, other than that, Moodle has its own assignment receipts as well. In the assignment you create, the record would be there so the student can actually print out to show that they have uploaded their assignment. They receive a receipt for that assignment. All right. Also, just a reminder, if you're giving out an assignment that is, an essay or anything like that, we're asking and recommending to you that you guys use Turnitin as much as possible. So as long as it's an essay, they're just supposed to do, their references and, citations, etc. you need to ensure that the students turn it in to make sure that one, you're getting assignments that are, you know, original, and you know, it's a way of having the student learn how to properly reference their material and cite their material, because that's one of the issues that we found in exams where students were not citing the information properly. So the index that would come back for plagiarism would have been very high. And many times when you look at it, it was because of the way that they cited their material. You know, it wasn't cited properly. All right. But anyway, so just to kind of wrap up, I don't hear any other questions. Yes, Doc, we'll make the recording available as soon as possible. The key is to add your content. Again, you can use the lessons, that you can create as many lessons as you wish, and you can put restrictions on your lessons so that, you know, if you do lesson 1, once you do lesson 1, then you can do lesson 2, and, you know, etc., etc., etc. as you go along. You can't do lesson 5 until you've done lesson 4. You can't do lesson 4 until you've done lesson 3. And you can use that as part of your grades, so to ensure that the student actually goes through your material. Again, we spoke about the incentive aspect. If a student is not getting an incentive, then they're not willing to do it. So if you add a lesson and there's no grade, nothing attached to it, and it doesn't stop them from accessing anything else, then no student is going to read it. No student is going to go through it. But even if you don't attach a grade to the lesson itself, but if you put that in order for you to do my mid-semester test, you must read or must go through the lesson. So in other words, the test has a restriction that says that the lesson must be complete, and the lesson, in the lesson settings, it is set that the activity can only be completed if you have started at the beginning and you get to the end. And if in there you have questions that force them to read the material because they can't get to the end unless they read the material and answer the questions correctly, then that's how you force them to read and understand. So that way they have to read the material to the questions that are in the test and get them correctly to get to the end, and they have to get to the end in order to do the exam. All right, and so therefore you'll have more reading taking place because every student wants to do the mid-semester. So the grades don't have to actually be on the lesson itself, but as long as the restriction is there on the mid-semester or on any other assignment that you're giving to say you must complete that activity or those activities in order for you to actually do this, even the CCCJ common coursework. You put it up and you say, look, you can't submit, you can't view the assignment until you have actually gone through and completed those lessons, right? So even though there's no grade on the lessons, there's a grade on the CCCJ common coursework. And until they do all of those other lessons, they can't access it. And even if I get it from a friend, they can't upload it, right? Because once you set that in the settings that your assignment cannot be submitted until these requirements are met, then it means that even if the student says, oh, the assignment is to do ABC, they can go do ABC all they want. The first thing you're going to ensure, you're going to say, I don't want the assignments emailed to me. They must come through Moodle. Because what students will do now, they'll email, sir, see the assignment here now because me not get through a Moodle and there's something not work. And one thing you have to be aware of. Students will tell you anything, especially if they're not sure if you know all about it, to try and say, oh, is the technology giving trouble, sir? That's why I have to email it. Sometimes it has nothing to do with that. Sometimes it has to do with they're trying to get around the restrictions. And because of that, no, they tell you something just to try and see if you're going to be sympathetic and say, oh, it's all right, so all right, I'll accept it via email. So it's very important that when you're accepting assignments and you put all these restrictions on it, you say, no, you must submit it through Moodle. You must submit it through Moodle. And one of the things that you can do also in Moodle when it comes to even submitting assignments, you can give a leeway or a grace period. you don't have to tell them what the grace period is because the Moodle doesn't show them. So for example, you can say that an assignment is due at 12 o'clock, but you will continue accepting assignments up to 1 o'clock. Moodle doesn't tell them that it's 1 o'clock that it's due. Moodle tells them that it's due 12 o'clock. They don't know that you're accepting until 1 o'clock unless you tell them. And so because of that, if a student logs on and let's say they have some kind of issue or the internet went or it was taking longer than expected, then when 12 o'clock comes, they'll still be allowed to upload. All that will happen is the system will mark them as being late to tell you that the assignment was uploaded after 12, but still it was uploaded before 1 o'clock. All right. So again, if you use the restrictions and ensure that they are, you stick to the restrictions, then you'll be able to manage and control these situations a lot better. But if you're just listening to this and say, oh, they said I couldn't upload because the system was down. Contact IT. System down, is anything wrong? Because sometimes what they're telling you is not actually factual. All right, and you don't. If you bypass it for one, you have to bypass it for all. All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Bonner.
Yes.
Yes, and would the mid-semester exams be uploaded on this site, or do they have to be through IT department and it be hidden from the students? Would you go ahead and upload it and then hide it from you, or you put it through IT?
No, all right. So your mid-semester exams are well, that would have been something that you'd have said because that's a part of your course development. If it's that you need assistance, adding it to Moodle, then yes, we're always willing to assist. In terms of uploading that for you and putting in the correct settings if you want. So we're always willing to assist with that. But you don't have to go through IT because that is your.
Because I remember at the beginning you had established a difference between the SMS system.
Right.
So there's some things that the students will see, and there's some things they can't see. So at what point would they be allowed to see the mid-semester exam?
Oh, well, that depends on the setting that you put on. So, for example, if you remember the availability setting that was there, you can actually put exactly when the test is available, and you can even put when it is hidden and when it is revealed. So, for example, so those are some of the settings that exist for tests. So, one of the things you have to understand about Moodle is that depending on the type of activity, some settings are there that aren't available in others. So like for example, when it comes to in the lesson you didn't see like a grace period, but that's because the lesson doesn't require a grace period per se. But in a test, there is a grace period setting that is there. So every activity has some slight variations or some settings that aren't available in others because of the type and nature of that activity.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, colleagues, I will end here. Is there any other questions?
Mr. Bono, if this is where you end, I would like you to share with your two persons or those persons who should have been meeting you at 1 o'clock. It's now after 1, and I'm not sure if you want to be engaging people for so long on the system. I don't know if you want to push it back to a little later in the afternoon, because we have a schedule for tomorrow and Thursday. So maybe you want to give persons maybe a 2-hour break or so for the afternoon session, just to relieve the eyes, etc. But if there are no other questions or clarifications, I would move to somebody has a raised hand, Mr. Hall. Acknowledging you, Mr. Hall.
Afternoon, Madam VP. Mr. Bonner.
Yes, Mr. Hall.
Good afternoon.
I meet with the nurses at 1 o'clock, you see?
Mm-hmm.
What platform I must use?
Okay. All right, give me some context. You meet with the nurses for class?
Yes.
All right, face-to-face, online?
It will be online if it's 1 o'clock.
Okay.
it would have, I don't know.
Mr.
Well,
Hall, let me interject right here, Mr. Hall. Did you speak with the head of nursing to find out how these classes will be facilitated this week? Because I'm not sure Mr. Bonner is able to answer that question just now when he's completing a training, and I'm not sure that anything was organized through his desk or even my desk for that matter.
Let me put it to you another way. See, in my facilitation of the nurses, which starts tomorrow, am I able to use Moodle or do I have to use Google Classroom?
Okay, all right. For tomorrow's lesson, no, you wouldn't be able to use Moodle. Right, because the timetable information would have to go in. For the nurses, it should be in before next week because if I'm correct, Mrs. Thomas, the nursing department have already made their timetable. So it should be in before next week, but not don't for tomorrow. It will be a push to get all that information in for tomorrow.
All right, I will then use the Google Classroom and a Zoom thing until such time.
Right. And just to let you know, colleagues, I mean, Google Classroom is good, but some of the settings that you have in Moodle, you will not find those in Google Classrooms currently. Later on, maybe they'll add them, but you know, they aren't there right now. All right, so just a word for you to know.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hall, for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Bonner, for your response. And I just want to thank Mr. Hall for that question because the principal would have advised that we did spend as a school, as a college, spend quite a bit of funding outlaying this platform for us. And so we're all encouraged to use it and use it such that you will be helping to self-care. This is one way to help you take care of yourself if you organize yourself in such a way that the students take on, become more responsible for their own learning. So Mr. Bonner, I don't know if there are any more questions, but I want to also remind, if there aren't any more questions, my final reminder is that staff, please remember that your queries are sent to Miss Cydia Brown and Mr. Tyrone Maxwell. Mr. Bonner is the chief person who responds to the principal and to CCCJ. And so we are encouraging you to go the route of Mr. Maxwell and Miss Brown because Mr. Bonner is overwhelmed. And I would say, and especially know that the registrar is not in place, a lot of the stuff that would be done by the registrar, I am almost certain are now going to be placed in the lap of Mr. Bonner. So I'm asking you please to help him, help us by referring your queries to Mr. Maxwell and Miss Brown, as the college have designated them and as they have been so trained to assist us. Thank you, Mr. Bonner. Thank you, team. Mr. Bonner, back to you. It's your stage.
All right, thanks again, Ms. Thomas and colleagues. Thank you for your time and your participation. Again, if you have any questions, you can always contact the IT team and we'll be glad to assist you learning. Maybe we can set up another session where we really get to do more of a hands-on. But this, unfortunately, this session, you know, the time is limited and, you know, it's a lot of information, a lot of settings for us to actually run through for you to see what the settings are about. But again, we're going to create a course container specifically for you to test. And then, as I said, as you test and you're getting the hang of it or you're understanding it and you want to start going live with your actual courses, please remember to delete it so that you don't leave it, you know, the area, you know, clustered for other persons. All right. I appreciate you working with me through the session, and I hope you guys can utilize this so that you guys really get to organize better. One of the reasons why I really wanted you guys to learn how to use the lesson activity is because I have seen for myself that sometimes when your classes are on, or when other things are there that are impacting you, especially in your personal life. So, for example, my children go to school in the day. I have classes in the day as well, and sometimes I have to be over them and I have to be in class. So, what I have to be doing is organizing classes at night when they're at sleep, sorting out everything, putting plans in place, putting activities on. So when my students, go on online, they have their activities to complete, and that kind of gives me a little bit more freedom to really work with the personal situation that I also have to deal with. And so that's one reason I really want you guys to understand some of these concepts, some of these lessons and activities, because by using them, it can really help you to be a little bit more flexible with the current situation that we're faced with. All right. Sorry, Mrs. Barnes.
Mr. Bonner, I don't know if I missed it, but the ISIMS training for 1:30 today, is that at 1:30 or when is that on?
So we wanted to give persons a break. So what, instead of 1:30, I was hoping we could come back at 2:30. It's not for everybody, unless you choose to be. It's really for the new staff and persons who are coming over from admin who wouldn't have been introduced to ISIMS before. However, if you or anybody else would like to attend, then it's okay for anybody else to attend. But we want to start at 2:30. Persons can have some lunch, take a rest on the ice, and then we meet back at that time if you're interested. But again, the session is more for the new staff who wouldn't have any training whatsoever on ISIMS.
Mr. Bono, I know you'd like to wrap up. This is Evora Thompson. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Question. Will the students be oriented regarding this new or adjusted modality? I remember trying to do something like this and students were saying, aren't we having classes? So for our returning students who are used to us being online for 3 hours, how do we orient them now to say this is the new way and that, they would not be short? Even eventually they'll realize that they're getting value, but how do we orient them coming into the system now? Or will we be doing that?
All right, so that's all right. So what our department really does is really just show a person how to utilize, but we don't actually go to that direction as to, orient students as that about the new way of learning, that sort of thing. But what I'd advise you is to sit down and speak with your students, have a session and speak with them, address some of the concerns that they will have had and explain to them the benefits of doing it this way. Some of the great benefits I would have mentioned before. So for example, one, when you use a Zoom session, it is extremely highly data driven. So that's a lot of data that they have to use. And if you're using a digital or flow telephone for your data, not a regular cable modem or so, then what it means is that you are being metered and your data is going to finish very quickly. And not many students have the funds for that. The other one of the beautiful things is if you're using a lot of YouTube videos, that's why I push for you guys to use to put the video also on YouTube, is because these companies, they offer free social media. So for example, if you even were to record yourself and place that video on YouTube and not play it through Zoom, and maybe have a question and answer session, where it's sending the messages to ask questions or something like that, what you will find is that the student actually use less data because you're using YouTube, which is free, instead of actually using Zoom, which is not free. So once you go through the overall advantages to them, the fact that they can be learning on their own time, because another thing that I found in my classes that was happening to some of my students was parents now were, oh, you're home, so go run down the road to pick up A, B, C for me. Sometimes the parents aren't remembering, yeah, they're home, but they're still in class. They still have classes that they need to attend. So when you start really explaining some of the advantages that, you know, they can be in a lesson and pause it and go do what they have to do and come back. They don't have to be trying to learn at everybody else's pace, which is one of the problems you've had before. You know, if they need to spend more time to learn something, they can spend it because, you know, they don't have to worry that the lecture gone ahead of them. They control how fast the lesson progresses for them. And things, so they can spend more time. So if you go through and explain some of the advantages that will occur, I think they'll more appreciate it. Persons who are students who tend to be faster, I think will appreciate the fact that they can go at the pace that they would like to go, and they don't have to be waiting on the others to catch up. So for me, that's what I would advise them about in terms of, you know, orienting them to when they come to your classes, to say, these are the advantages that you will have by, you know, using these technologies, and then reassuring them that you're always still available. So it's not that you are leaving them with just Moodle and saying, learn everything as though I've had it on Moodle, and if you don't learn it, that is your problem. No, you are still available. That they can ask questions, that they can make their queries, you know, we're not saying to completely come off Zoom completely. You can still have a 15-minute session or a half-an-hour session. But what we're saying is that instead of having us online on a Zoom session for 3 hours, you know, and many students say they don't really like that, because looking at a screen for 3 hours is not a nice thing. Presenting on a screen for 3 hours is not a nice thing, right? So if you really show them the advantages and then reassure them, then I think they'll be more receptive to it.
Mr. Bono, Mrs. Taylor has her hand up.
Okay, Mrs. Taylor.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. There's an additional advantage, and we do have working students, and I think this is very fitting for them as well. It will work well with them as well. And secondly, from the CCCJ desk, I would like to say thank you for you and your team for all the hard work that you have been doing and helping staff and students. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Taylor. Yes, I do agree with you with the students who are working. When you think about it, it opens up the field for us as well, because, you know, it means that we can have students from anywhere. We can have students who work, who don't work, who anything at all. In fact, I was just speaking to a student earlier today who was from who was interested in one of our IT programs, and, you know, that was one of the first questions: are we having any of our classes face to face, because she's from Obey, but she'd like to attend the program. So when you think about it, all of these little things can open us up to ensure that we have a lot more students coming in, and I really hope we can really run with this as much as possible. As I said, it's beneficial to you and it's beneficial to the students. You know, these kind of modes of educating, once you plan, and that's the key, it's planning. You know, plan your lessons out well. And once you plan, you spend the time to plan them out, then you should be fine. Ms. Thompson asked about the timetabling in terms of the asynchronous. Your timetable is still designed as it would have been. It's because you still have your time. It's how you choose to use it now that is up to you. So so you have still had your hours, how they were assigned, how they were by your HOD. However, How you use that time is up to you. You know, if you plan your session and have your meet the students, whatever, you know, I mean, it's a department-based thing. Not so much for me to answer, but if you plan your thing well and have your asynchronous mode, then you can meet your students once or twice a week for 15 minutes or half an hour and then have them doing the learning. Or you can actually have them do it the week before, so they could do the lessons the week before. And so when you meet them, say for example, next week, what you're really doing is saying, this is a question and answer session. You get to ask questions that you're not so certain of. So you completed the lesson from last week, but now we're going to go through a question and answer session about last week's material. So just reinforce what you may, you know, not so be certain on. And then, you know, this week you're going on to the next lesson, and then next week you have the question and answer session. So your Zoom session or your face-to-face, but your online session is more a question and answer section for them, and not a lecture instructional session as it would have been. All right. Right. So this question okay. So the time we'll be proposing is 2:30 for the ISIMS training. All right. All right. So as I said to you before, I placed the link to the Moodle docs in the chat. I'm going to also put it on ISIMS for you, so you can look at ISIMS, you should see it. And I'm also going to ask Mrs. Thomas to email it out to you. So again, if you want any information about anything, I think my screen is still being shared, so I can show you. If you want information on anything, it's there. So you have table of contents. Every single thing that exists in Moodle is there. It talks about, there's some things it talks about that you would need to know, like installation and managing the Moodle site, right? But it talks about all the different activities that are there. So managing a Moodle course, the courses, editing your text, the activities, the blocks, all that is actually there. Detailed information on the different activities, how you use the chat, how you use choice, how you use database, how you use external tools, etc., and how you give feedback. So you can actually get a lot of information from that. And some of them have videos like you have seen before, some of them do, but again, if you don't understand something, you can always ask us, we can try and get you some additional information on it. But these are good links for you to look at, because Moodle is actually used widely around the world, probably one of the most widely used LMS globally, partly because it's actually free. The software itself is actually free. All you have to do is host it. That's the only thing. You have to, you know, pay for servers to host it, or you host your own server. But the software, you can actually just download the software. So many schools use it. Sometimes schools use it, they don't realize that's what they're using, because they use skins that cover it, make it look a certain way. But it's actually just regular Moodle, just the same. All right. So once you learn Moodle here, it's almost the same anywhere you go. The same way it kind of works, or you interact with it. And many other different types of softwares are basically the same. The interaction might be slightly different. They all have different advantages and disadvantages, but they're all generally the same thing. All right. So thanks again for your time, everybody. And again, I'll send you the link for the video as soon as I download it and upload it to YouTube. I'll send the link to you. And so you can always go back and look at it and try. But try to create some lessons. I'm going to create the folder for you right now and add it to it. So try to create some lessons, and then you can use it throughout the semester. All right. Have a good evening, and thanks again.
Mr. Bonner?
Yes.
One final question, sir, before you go. Is there a timeline as to when these Zoom accounts are going to be closed?
Well, there is, because what happens is that we had paid for 1 year. I just don't remember the dates that year should end. I have to check back the dates, but it should be It should be sometime now, actually, because we had paid for those Zoom accounts. It was very close to now. So if it hasn't yet, it should be closing down right about now. And so when we renew, I've received the email. Well, that email will go to the school, but when they get the renewal link, then they'll be closing. So it will be right about now that it will be going down. And just to mention to HODs, because though the amount of accounts, licensed accounts will go down, it also means that you need to determine who from your department will receive. You can basically cut how many persons you had now. So if you had 6 accounts, then assume that you will have about 3 now, and try to start working on who will have it. However, just a reminder that what we're talking about is licensed accounts that have unlimited time. So you still, if you don't have a license account, you still have a 40-minute window. It just means that you have to end your 40-minute class and start over. All right. But if we were to really go as asynchronous and only have a 40-minute class per week or 40-minute sessions only, then you really wouldn't need a license account because you always will have access to that 40-minute window. So whether you have a license account or not, you have an account that gives you 40 minutes. All right.
Okay, so in other words, you're saying we could go back to our personal Zoom account, use those for our sessions when we want to interact online. And
no, I'm saying you can use the same Knox account that gives you 40 minutes, just the same too.
Okay.
Yeah, the Knox account gives you the same 40 minutes as well. So you don't have to go to a personal one, you can still use the Knox one. So so the Knox one, somebody will have been licensed, and licensed just meant that you had unlimited time. All right. Unlicensed just meant that you had a 40-minute window. So you can use the same Knox account, but just know that you will have a limit of 40 minutes to each meeting.
Okay. Thank you for clearing up that, sir.
No problem.
Mr. Bonner, sorry, just one more question before you go. Could we also utilize Google Meets as a medium of reaching the students?
Yes, that is also an option as well. Google Meets is also an option. And just to let you know, a part of our Gmail package, because we have a package with Google Education. That's where you have your emails, right? But you also have access to YouTube, so you can actually have your own YouTube channel under the school's with your school email and upload your class videos to it and give the link to your students. You have that option as well.
Mr. Bonner, just one more question. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Just one thing before you ask the question. The only thing we're saying to you though is please bear in mind that when you're using Zoom as well, but Zoom, Google Meets, etc., please ensure that the students that are attending your classes are registered. You are not to have students in your class that aren't registered, because when you do that, it undermines compromises the entire system, because what that means is that students are doing things and they're not going to register because they're already getting through. So we try to ensure students register. There are a lot of things that are required for students to be registered. For example, things such as insurance and accountability and how many students you actually have in the school. Those numbers are generated from iSIMS now. And if a student is not registered and you have them in your class, then technically they don't exist to the school. So the only way for us to ensure students actually get themselves registered, we have to ensure that as long as they're not on your registration list, you need to tell them to go to registry, you cannot facilitate them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bonner. One more question, please, Mr. Bonner. That information on Moodle and accessing Moodle, is it available to the students, or is there a link that we can send to them? Because I'm sure they'll want to know the new ones.
When you say accessing Moodle, what you mean?
Okay. Are the students aware that the assignments will be given to them via Moodle and there will be interactions via that medium?
Well, all right, so once a student comes in, they are going to be given an orientation video actually. that we're expecting them to watch that will actually inform them of how they access Moodle from iSIMS, and then from there it's really the ball is really in your court. So once we show them how to get into your class containers, then what you have in your class containers now is what will guide them as to how they proceed.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
No problem. All right. If there are no other questions, we'll end here.
Okay, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bonner.
You're welcome, no problem.
Thank you, Mr.
All right.
Bonner.
All right, thank you. You're welcome. Take care, guys.